Crossley, Sunday night at 6 here on 89.7 GBH and the GBH app.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you?
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. As crews continue to search the Potomac River for victims of Wednesday's mid-air collision between an American Airlines regional jet and a military helicopter near Washington, D.C., the National Transportation Safety Board has retrieved the flight data and voice recorders from the plane. Todd Inman is a member of the board.
We will be on scene here doing all the recovery of the perishable evidence that we need for as long as it takes.
He says investigators are still collecting evidence as crews work to salvage the aircraft that broke into 3 pieces and is in waist-deep water. 67 people died in the crash. So far, more than 24 bodies have been recovered. Meanwhile, the figure skating community is grieving the loss of young skaters, coaches, and families who died. NPR's Kristen Wright has more.
As stories emerge of the hopes and dreams of these young skaters, the world of figure skating is still in disbelief. Aurora Michelle coaches in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, and remembers practicing with a boy who was on the plane.
I feel heartbroken because there are so many young lives that were lost. So many promising young lives that were lost.
Michelle placed flowers at Ashburn Ice House in Northern Virginia at a growing memorial for the rink's skaters and a coach who died. She says the skating community is very close.
And so when someone in our community is hurting, it affects all of us.
School officials in Virginia's Fairfax County say 3 of their students and 6 parents were also on board. The superintendent is asking people to hold each other closer. Kristen Wright, NPR News, Washington.
As a candidate, Donald Trump disavowed Project 2025, the controversial policy agenda. But NPR's Franco Ordonez reports many of the directives he's issued as president come from the 900-page playbook.
The proposed freeze on federal grants was just the latest directive by President Trump that was outlined in Project 2025. So is a proposal to end birthright citizenship and diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Project 2025 also offered detailed plans to reshape and shrink the federal workforce, including instituting a hiring freeze and reclassifying workers. Now, critics see Project 2025 as a roadmap of how Trump is trying to expand his presidential powers. And Democratic senators are pointing to the playbook as justification for trying to block Trump's pick for White House budget director, Russ Vought. But the White House and allies discount any overlap, charging that Trump is simply carrying out promises that he made on the campaign trail. Franco Ordonez, NPR News.
And President Trump says he's planning to place 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico as soon as tomorrow. That could drive up the price of everything from pickup trucks to guacamole dip. Trump, though, says he hasn't decided yet if the tariffs will include oil imports. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. John, hold on one second. I got to advance my page. I'll be right with you. Here we go. 50 years after Boston Public Schools were desegregated, some Latino educators say the system remains segregated as ever. That was one of the views shared at a panel discussion last night hosted by the Boston Desegregation and Busing Initiative. Lorna Rivera, sociologist at UMass Boston, says language is now a major dividing line within BPS, where 43% of students are English language learners.
We continue to really struggle with the sheltered English immersion, with not really providing enough a dual language instruction. Margarita Muniz is the only high school, right, doing the dual language. We really are very slow to continue to support the language rights.
As a consequence, Rivera says many students who still are learning English are left behind. Secretary of the Commonwealth Bill Galvin reminding property owners that receiving higher than expected third quarter tax bills this week that property tax abatement applications are due on the same day as their tax bills. Now, the deadline to file for an abatement and pay for the third quarter tax bill in many Massachusetts municipalities is tomorrow, Feb 1. But because tomorrow is Saturday, the deadline is now moved to Monday, February 3rd. If a request for an abatement is denied, a homeowner can appeal to the state appellate tax board. Celtics in New Orleans tonight, 41 degrees outside our studios, light rain starting to fall. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, helping NPR advance journalistic excellence in the digital age.
Hey, Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. Thank you. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Good morning, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. So we're going to aggravate you for the first 30 minutes, which is what most people think we do best. But then we're going to soothe you for the next 30 minutes with some of the most beautiful music I have ever heard. You'll hear them in about 25 minutes. They're rehearsing this morning. Yesterday, Northeastern University joined a growing chorus of weak institutions deciding to backtrack on promises to create a more welcome, inclusive, diverse, and, God forbid, education institution. They're not alone. As you know, Target is rolling back DEI initiatives, Meta, Amazon, McDonald's, Walmart. But then on the other hand, as we said, there's Costco and Delta Airlines that actually are sticking true to their principles. There's the president of Mount Holyoke, the president of Wesleyan, that is standing up to all this crap from Washington and from places like Harvard. And you have a choice. Do you send your kid, for example, to an institution that aligns with your values? Do you shop at places that align with your values and stay away from businesses that do not? Our number is 877-301-8970, and I'm going to beat you all to your text. I know the text is going to say, you and Marjorie are the last two people to talk about this kind of thing. You're both hypocrites.
We are.
You trash Jeff Bezos and then go home and order from Amazon, which is true. Jim, someone said you drive a Tesla, which I do, even though I have utter contempt for Elon Musk. And now saying to friends, which is even more pathetic, I wouldn't have bought it if it was now. Almost humiliated to even say those words. It's true, but the point is, I think we're getting to a tipping point, at least a lot of us do. And the question is now, do we support those people who have the courage? And it takes a lot of courage. Costco, did you know this morning, 19 attorneys general are suing them for their DEI position?
Yeah, well, I didn't know it until today, but it's so extraordinary that Attorney General is going to go after Costco, a private company, and tell them what they're going to do. But they're coming after all these private universities as well and telling them the same thing. So talk about government overreach. I mean, that used to be something that GOP didn't like. It's to instill fear. And as we know, if you saw the president's press conferences yesterday, he blamed this airplane crash on DEI. He blamed the wildfires out in California on DEI. He blamed the terrorist attack in New Orleans. He said that was someone that had come into the country illegally, which is not true. But the things he was complaining about, Jim, as being outrageous that the FAA did, were things he did in his own first administration.
That was a Washington Post story. As well, the policies were adopted during the Obama administration. They were advanced and implemented during Trump's first term in office. Exactly what he was trashing. By the way, we're only going to do this once. Since you mentioned Trump, and we were on the air when he did this at his press conference, and we were luckily talking to Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, whose response I thought was just perfect. We'll play that for you later. Here's a little clip of one of the things Trump had to say about the plane crash.
We put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program. Then another article, the Federal Aviation Administration, this was before I got to office, recently, second term. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website.
And it ends with, can you imagine? And I say to him, can you imagine telling the truth, Donald Trump? We're not going to talk about Trump. We're going to talk about people and institutions that have faded because of the glare of Donald Trump, and those institutions and individuals who had the courage to stand up for their principles, and whether we're going to stand up and support those who share our values and avoid those who do not. 877-301-8970.
But it's kind of becoming an epidemic all over the country.
Epidemic.
I mean, we talked about how Facebook has settled this lawsuit now. Remember, Donald Trump was upset when Facebook threw him off after the January 6th riot at the Capitol. Now he's settled this lawsuit with Facebook, $25 million. Meta Facebook is giving to him. Paramount, they're the owner of CBS and 60 Minutes, and Trump was upset when he thought that Kamala Harris, the interview on 60 Minutes was edited in a way that was unfavorable to him. They're talking about settlement, settling with him too, this lawsuit, just giving him money to keep him, to satisfy him so he won't thwart any of their business endeavors. I mean, it's really kind of incredible. Everybody's kind of knuckling down.
Well, we haven't used the term in a week.
We all have to join Costco, I guess. We all have to go out and join Costco.
Well, some of us belong to Costco.
I don't belong to Costco. Maybe I should. I understand they have very cheap gas at Costco, which is very nice.
No one cares about the gas. They have a hot dog that is the size of your head and a soda for $1.50. Plus, they support their DEI
That's right. And they have wonderful deals on toilet paper and paper towels. You want to have 110 paper towels in your house, paper towel packages, I should say.
Cheap wine and beer, too, by the way.
Yeah, that
liquor.
Kirkland.
Yeah,
okay. It's very good.
I think we're getting off topic. 877, as which we always do. 877-301-8970. I should say one thing, by the way, which may temper what we're saying. I have no intention of shopping at Target anymore. However, a bunch of black entrepreneurs are in a newspaper article we read this morning whose products sell at Targets and said, don't boycott this company. It's going to hurt us. So a lot of people think that, and I respect their opinion, obviously. But I don't respect the institution. That's the same institution that took their LGBTQ stuff off the shelves. Was it over Christmas or was it before Christmas? So they have a history of backtracking in the face of Trumpism, and that's not my cup of tea.
They backtracked on Pride. Remember, they took the Pride stuff off the shelves, the LGBTQ stuff. Target did.
I just
People
said.
were upset about that too. Okay, Marty Meehan.
Were you here for that?
I was reading about Marty Meehan,
Okay, fine.
who's the president of UMass.
Oh, what did he do?
Well, he said there have been no layoffs of DEI personnel. But he's also kind of wishy-washy on this. He said none of this is going to change our commitment to diversity and inclusiveness. But he's talking about language changes. A lot of companies and nonprofits are looking at the language, what language you use to identify that mission to be inclusive. So I guess Northeastern is saying that they're going to still stick to the commitment, even though they're changing.
So is Mark Zuckerberg. That is BS. Here's the line in the Globe story. On their website, Northeastern used to say, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Northeastern believes in a welcoming and inclusive environment for all. That is now gone and replaced by belonging at Northeastern, whatever the hell that means. 877-301-8970. What do you think of this? What are you going to do? By the way, we're going to do one upbeat thing. We have an anonymous texter. Where's Jody in the audience? Jody, where are you? There's Jody. Jody is 30. Hey guys, we are here for my wife Jody's 30th birthday. She wanted to play hooky at work and come see you guys for her birthday. The woman sitting next to us is Amy. Amy, where are you? There's Amy, who drove down from Maine to do this for her birthday. Let's say happy birthday to Jody and Amy.
Happy birthday.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for coming
Today. Boy, was that cheap on my part, I'll tell you.
But one last thing, and then I'll shut up. We'll get to the calls and texts. But what's next? Is the federal government, is Donald Trump going to start telling people what they can teach?
What's the most powerful higher education institution in the world?
Well, I would say Harvard University.
Who was buckled first of the great universities to Harvard?
They've buckled.
To Trump. This neutrality policy, which we've discussed with Khalil Gibran Muhammad, we'll discuss again on Monday, where they said we'll be neutral on things that don't reflect our core values. And what that means in English, anything that upsets Donald Trump will be neutral about. And here is how great. On CNN with Audie Cornish, and then we'll get to your calls. In September, Wesleyan's president, this guy Michael Roth, described the Harvard policy as an educational disservice at best and cowardice at
Well,
worst.
here's
I
the
mean,
thing.
how much do you love this guy?
Here's the thing, and it is that when you have that much money as Harvard does, or when you have as much money as Jeff Bezos does, or Mark Zuckerberg does, you would think that would, it's not like you're a regular Joe and Jane, knowing if you stand up for something at the office, you could lose your job and then not be able to pay the rent or the mortgage. These are people that have so much money. You would think that it would buy them a little bit more courage, and that's what's kind of, I think, upsetting.
Here's Maureen who texts, I vote with my feet. I canceled the Washington Post. Will not review the...
Hold on. What's wrong with the New York Times, Maureen?
Marjorie's daughter works there. That's
right.
Why. Will not shop at Amazon or order from retail that uses Amazon delivery. Walmart, Target, no Facebook for years. Zuck sucks. There's more. I keep a list. I called Costco to give them my thanks. I've asked my company to reaffirm their DEI policy is important. They create medical content.
All right. Maureen, on behalf of my daughter who does work at the New York Times, has got 2 little kids, they are doing a hell of a job at the New York Times. They're a family-owned company, and they are standing up to power. So don't cancel them. They're doing a great job. One family owns them, Jim.
Okay, Cattell, and I hope I pronounced your name right.
Plus, they have a great cooking page.
That's good enough reason for me. Cattell in Arlington, you are first on Boston Public Radio. Thanks for calling. Hi.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, you pronounced my name perfectly.
Great.
I called to kind of say what you were saying before, Jim. I am going to keep shopping at Target, even though I'm really angry at them, because of these Black-owned businesses. And it's kind of the same debate I had about Facebook. I'm part of really important social justice-oriented communities there, and I'm not going to let him kick me out of those communities. So it's complicated.
It is totally complicated, and I respect that. But don't you think, let's stay with Target for a second, the message you're sending, despite your good intentions, and they are obviously good intentions, and I understand them, is we'll keep spending money at your store despite what you were saying about people who I care about in this world. So how do you get that message across to them if you keep shopping there?
Well, I mean, I think it doesn't have to be all or nothing. I think you can be careful about what you buy at the stores.
Okay.
I think you can speak out. I think you can try to access Facebook on devices that block ads so that Zuckerberg isn't getting money that way.
Those are good thoughts, Cattell. I hear you. Maybe there is a nuanced kind of position. And by the way, I totally respect. I feel the same conflict. I've just made, I think, a different decision. But I'm really glad you expressed it and you did it well. Thanks for the call.
I think a lot of us feel bad about Target because, of course, they have a lot of great stuff at Target.
That's not what Cattell was talking about. She was talking about supporting black businesses, not a lot of good stuff at Target.
But I think for much less edified reasons, people do love that store. But, of course, people love Amazon, too. We have a lot of our texters who say they don't shop at Amazon unless they can't find what they want anyplace else.
Well, that's what you should do. You should shop locally, and we talk about that all the time.
We do, but it's harder and harder when they're locking everything up at, behind the locked doors at CVS.
Can I ask you a question about Jody and Amy, the birthday people?
Yes.
An anonymous texter wants to know, are tickets at the library discounted on your birthday? I believe you got cheap tickets today. Is that correct? They did. Of course they did. Let's go to Kim and Norton. You're next on Boston Public Radio with Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. Hi.
Hi, long-time listening, caller, all
Thank
the
you.
things. Oh, sorry.
We know what you mean. We're really glad to have you. What's up?
I am changing so much of my behavior because I feel like maybe the economic power is all I have. I canceled Amazon. I'm not dealing with Meta anymore. I loved TikTok, and I have deleted that app, so I can't even bring it back now. But I hit my husband the hardest with Trader Joe's.
Okay,
what'd they do? I missed that one. What'd they do?
What'd they do wrong?
They are with Bezos and Zuckerberg, or maybe, no, I'm sorry, Bezos and Musk, trying to defeat unions, trying to get rid of NLRB.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's a fine point, actually. And by the way, Donald Trump fired 2 members of the National Labor Relations Board a couple of days ago because he wants the NLRB to be less pro-worker and more pro major employer. Thank you for telling us that. An anonymous texter makes a very important point. We should have said, you guys keep saying Trump is bullying these executives into saying the things he wants, but you're missing the point. They agree with him. And they only went along with Black Lives Matter and DEI nonsense because it was nonsense, meaning to them, because it was a fad and make Zuckerberg and Bezos money. I totally agree.
But I don't think that's true. I think when you read a lot of these...
It was totally performative.
Yeah, but when you look at these stories, Costco saying, a lot of the other companies saying, it's been good for the bottom line. It's been very good for the bottom line. Who doesn't think it's good for the bottom line to have a diverse workforce?
When did almost all these companies do it? After George Floyd was murdered.
That's right.
Right.
But I think we have known for quite some time that it's not just about feeling like you're a good person or a good corporate guy. It's about doing business better.
Well, let me be clear. I don't know this for a fact. I would assume that because of what you say, Shirley Young wrote a great column saying that the other day.
Yeah.
Since it's good for the bottom line, cowards like Zuckerberg and Bezos, I'm sure, are going to continue to hire a diverse workforce. They're just going to make sure they don't say anything in support of that diversity, because that's what upsets their new leader. I'm serious, Donald Trump. I mean, it is just, I meant to say this to you the other day.
Did you know this?
What?
Members of the Teamsters Union have authorized a strike against Costco next month as a preemptive bargaining position ahead of an expiration of a work contract for 18,000 company workers. Wow, set to start Saturday.
By the way, we'll look into that because Costco is generally believed to be a really, really good employer, but I don't know the facts on that thing. What I started to say to you, and then we got to take a break and we'll come back and talk about this a bit more. How do these people who have brains and some portion of their life, they're people with principle, their partner, their kid, their parent, their whatever, how do they go home at night after bowing down? And when their kid says to them, why'd you do that? Well, because it's going to make us $11 billion at the... I mean, I'm serious. How do you defend this kind of cowardly behavior?
It's happening all over the country. I mean, look at. I don't mean to keep dumping on the GOP, but look at this parade of, I would say, people with a lot of problems: Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, and RFK Jr., who puts baby chicks in a blender to feed to his hawks, or at least he did when he was younger.
That's Robert Kennedy.
That's Robert Kennedy.
Yeah.
The Republicans are they all going to vote for him? I think maybe Mitch McConnell won't vote for RFK Jr. because he was a polio survivor.
Yeah, maybe.
But how can you think for a minute that these people should be running these agencies, but they're all going to vote for them? And I would argue it's a lot easier if you're a United States Senator to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to stand on my principles.
I agree with you.
And when I go back to Minnesota or Montana or whatever it is, I think I'll be able to get a job as a former United States Senator or become a lobbyist or something like that. They're the ones that I think are really humiliating themselves. As Sheldon Whitehouse said, that is one of the great questions of the year 2025. How long are they willing to crawl on their hands and knees for
But
Donald
we
Trump?
learned about Sheldon Whitehouse the other day, which is not a negative reflection on him, who is a good friend of his and he went to law school with.
Bobby Kennedy.
And he said to Kennedy, his friend, the American people are frightened of you. And I thought that was perfect. That's exactly what they are. And I hope Senator Whitehouse does the right thing.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but we're talking about all of these universities, all these big companies, people bowing down to the president's obsession to get rid of DEI. What do you think? You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
In Korea, shamanism is a religious tradition that dates back thousands of years. Its practice remains widespread, but it's publicly frowned upon.
Basically, the Korean people, they don't want to reveal that they use shamanic services.
We bring you that story and the day's top global news next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Emerson Colonial Theater, with a Broadway production of Jason Robert Brown and Alfred Urie's musical Parade, coming to Boston for 2 weeks, this March 11th through March 23rd. Tickets at emersoncolonialtheater.com. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from medical bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have any unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan, Jim Browdy. We're live at the library. Marjorie's applauding there. Streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We are talking about institutions, educational, like Northeastern, corporations, McDonald's and Target, running as fast as they can away from their DEI commitments, while universities like Mount Holyoke and Wesleyan stand by them. Companies like Delta Airlines, Costco doing the same thing. We want to know if you're going to make a choice and patronize those who share your values and avoid those who don't. By the way, Ginny in West Newbury texts, can you please address Trump's most recent attack on funding for NPR and PBS? We talked about this morning. We decided it was too self-serving. But I'm serious. But we would urge you to read about what is going on in the Trump administration vis-a-vis public radio and public television.
I don't think we're popular.
Here's an anonymous text. My daughter is at Northeastern. Her, quote, sex, gender, and law class may be canceled due to this nonsense.
Well,
That's
what I'm wondering. Is it going to next be the coursework? I mean, we'll talk on Monday to Khalil Gibran Mohammed, who left Harvard, went to Princeton. I guess he's still teaching part-time at Harvard, who was singled out for classes he taught about African-American history with that Congresswoman,
Virginia Fox, chair of the committee.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you wonder. They're going to stop, people get degrees in gender studies. People get degrees in African-American studies. Is that going to be out the window?
How much do we asked Ayanna Pressley, who's on the oversight committee, where Mayor Wu's been invited to speak. Does she want her to come? And she said that's her choice. Mayor Wu said she's thinking about it. Don't you want her to go there and stand up?
I want her to go with her newborn. I want her to go with a newborn baby and nurse the baby right there in Congress and have them dump on this mother of a newborn baby while she answers. And Michelle Wu is pretty good at answering questions.
I would say she is.
A lot of politicians are not. She's pretty good.
Where do you want to go?
Dan in Dorchester, thank you for calling.
Hi, Dan.
Hey, guys. First of all, that's hilarious. I also want to see Wu go up against Comey to wipe the floor. But that said, I really wish I could shop with my morals. I just found out recently that Amazon does medication for extremely cheap. If you don't even have insurance, it can be cheaper than CVS. And unfortunately now, I'm stuck having to get my medication done through them because I only pay $2 per prescription. So then I'm stuck having to deal with a guy that decided that his newspaper couldn't back Kamala Harris.
Well,
it's disappointing, but...
Dan, let me speak to that in the voice of the first caller today. First of all, what Dan's talking about, I'm sure you all know, is Bezos vetoed the endorsement of Harris at the Washington Post, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 250,000 people did act on it and canceled their subscriptions. The first caller said you can take a middle ground. Maybe the middle ground for you is buy the medications, which are unaffordable elsewhere, from Amazon, and don't buy anything else from Amazon. The other stuff we all buy it from local small businesses and only buy what you have to buy because it's so affordable. Isn't that a reasonable compromise?
That works for me.
Well, that was that woman's idea, not mine, and she's right. Dan, I hope it goes well for you. Thank you so much for your call. 877-301-8970 is our number.
George from Hollis, New Hampshire said, Costco's the best. We spent $360 there, more, just yesterday. And not only are they doing the right thing by DEI, but 98% of their shareholders agree. But as you said earlier, Jim, when you get 19 attorneys general across the country going after you, I mean, it's going to be tough for them to hold on to their ground.
Well, I hope they don't fade, and I'm assuming they knew that litigation was coming, and I assume the people who run the company decided it was something. I mean, how do you feel if you're a worker at Costco versus being a worker at Target, and you're a person of color or a woman or a low-income person? How good do you have to feel if you work at a place that's defending people like you as opposed to working at a place where your boss is selling out people like you?
Well, somebody just texted right here and said his company is working in a company with a multi-billion-dollar company, called it spineless. So I think that listen, I'm sure a lot of people at Meta and Facebook are upset, and I'm sure. Look at the people that have left the Washington Post already. It's
some of their best reporters and editors, But let's be clear, not at the New York Times, because Marjorie's daughter works there.
That's right.
And we don't want to put her job at risk.
But again, they're not owned by the richest guy in the world, or one of the richest guys in the world, are they? They're owned by the Salzberger family.
Yeah, they're poor people.
They're not poor people, Jim, but they are standing up to speaking truth to power.
Well, we have a pretty rich guy who owns the paper in this town, the major paper, who has not put it. We had the editorial page editor.
That's right.
Saying there's been no influence ever exacted on him by the boss and Jim Dow about anything he's written. I'm talking about John Henry, obviously. So we have a good, I think, example of someone wealthy who's allowed a paper to grow and be independent, and I think really good. Emily and Newton, welcome to the show. Hi, Emily.
Hi, folks. I would say this is a situation of what the independent media, Midas Touch, calls WMD, weapon of mass distraction. Mm-hmm. Trump wants us talking about this stuff, so we're not talking about his putting billionaires in charge, slashing government in order to pay for billionaire tax cuts. But to address it, I would say DEI is the right thing to do morally, but also pragmatically. The reality is companies like Target need to be appealing to a wide swath of our society because they want our money.
I agree.
And you all know me. I do environmental advocacy.
We do know you.
In my space, we need to be appealing to a wide swath of society because we need everyone speaking up for a cleaner Charles River, healthy environment. So I don't have the luxury of just talking to rich white guys. Like, it's the right thing to do morally. It's the right thing to do pragmatically.
Emily, well said. As always, thank you much for your call. We really appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
You know, a couple of people are reminding me of when Trump was asked yesterday about was he going to go visit the site. Mm-hmm. And do you hear what he said?
No.
I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like, why am I going to go to the site? It's just water. And he made some reference to swimming that I couldn't really hear, but it was pretty astounding. And Caitlin Collins asked him, she's a tough reporter from CNN, and she asked him.
She's our anchor at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, when he was talking about how DEI was to blame, this is as the bodies were still being pulled, and we did not know the identity of the people. She said, "Are you getting ahead of your own investigation?" And he told her she was asking a terrible question, which she wasn't surprised.
She's a nasty woman, I'm sure.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Anyway, the what's the other water? I mean, wow. Jane from Scituate, thank you for calling.
Hey, Jane.
Oh, good morning. It's so good to hear your voice, and I have to thank God for you too. Thank goodness for you too.
Wow.
Well, thank you very much.
That's
I
one.
think I'm codependent. I don't know what I would do if I turn on the radio and it's silent some morning. My stomach's thinking about it. When it's silent,
rather
what
nice.
I'm going to do.
Yeah, we hope that doesn't happen to us.
Can I also say, Jane, I hate to be sort of syrupy. Every time someone says what you say, Marjorie and I look at each other knowingly, meaning what we allegedly do for you, you do for us, and then some. This is keeping us talking to people, even those who disagree, if they're civil, is keeping us afloat too.
Yep, you have everyone on, you listen to them, and also I
don't listen to everybody, but that's okay. Go ahead. Jane, what's up?
The call. The reason I called was, the other reason was...
Yeah, we didn't call you. You called us. Go ahead.
That's right. Amazon, I'm one who refused to use I'm the only person I know who will not use Amazon.
Good for you.
I get very stubborn about things like that. It's the same thing as the NFL. I boycotted Colin Kaepernick.
You and Emmett Price. Good for you, too. Yep.
I will not... Yeah, I get Irish stubborn. Anyway, so... except one time, well, I heard Bezos say he was going to put out all the independent bookstores, and that's pretty much what he did, way back. So that's exactly when I started boycotting. So I did have a friend who ordered a no-kill mousetrap because I couldn't find them anywhere.
Sure.
So that was a little cheating, but I had someone else order that.
Are we talking about mousetraps here? Was that the point of the call?
She's talking about buying stuff she can't get anywhere else. That's what a lot of people do.
Jane, you're a principled person. You're doing the right thing.
I had someone else do it because...
Oh, you have someone else.
It was,
by the way, Jane, let me give you a hint here. Having somebody else buy your stuff on Amazon doesn't quite cover...
Okay.
But you're great, and thank you for your kindness, and thank you for calling us. Call us again.
Okay. We're almost out of time here.
I want to squeeze one more really fast. Where do you want us to go back in Brighton? Give us somebody, and whoever that somebody is. John in Westford, you have 30 seconds. Go.
I'll be real quick. I'm not for DEI in that sense. I don't believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I believe in diversity, equality, and inclusion. And there's a big difference. And I think Zuckerberg, he was backpedaling or kissing Trump's behind because he's afraid of the ballot harvesting. with the Zuckerbucks. He donated $500 million to get out the vote in key districts that were. He's afraid that he'll be.
He gave 500. Excuse me, John. He gave $500 million to nonprofits which were nonpartisan, urging them, if I may, in an attempt to get them to ensure that with new voting methods like mail in 2016, people would vote in significant numbers. So those are the facts there, John. Thank you. And I think Zuckerberg's also worried about losing business to Elon Musk, but thank you much for the call. We appreciate it.
Okay, we are moving on. After a quick break, you're going to hear some incredible music up next. Live music is next, courtesy of China-born saxophone player Zishi Liu, ahead of a show at the Regattabar tomorrow. This is going to be spectacular. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Support for GBH
and
comes
Trinity
from
Rep, presenting Someone Will Remember Us. This moving new play is based on the real-life testimonies of U.S. military veterans, a Gold Star family, Iraqi civilians, and refugees living in Rhode Island. Now through February 23rd. TrinityRep.com. And MIT Federal Credit Union, with memberships open to the general public and serving the financial needs of their members through an array of financial services. To become a member, you can visit mitfcu.org, federally insured by NCUA. And Central Square Theater, presenting Space, a new play about the Mercury 13 female pilots, their ancestors, and the national civil rights space race that has spanned our past century. Through February 23rd, centralsquaretheater.org. In a two-part documentary, Ken Burns tells the story of Thomas Jefferson, principal author of the Declaration of Independence, and an enigma among American historical figures. Watch Thomas Jefferson tonight at 9 on GBH2.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy, live from the library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. From southern China all the way to Boston, Massachusetts, to become the first Chinese-born saxophone player to headline the landmark Charles Hotel Regattabar, Zishi Liu is our special guest for this week's round of Live Music Friday with his band. For tickets and information about this show tomorrow night, his website is zishimusic.com. We'll give it to you again a couple of times. You don't need to wait until tomorrow night, though, to hear Zishi and his band play their blend of Eastern and Western jazz. Here he is with his band performing a tune you obviously recognize. This is their spectacular arrangement of the Stevie Nicks classic, Landslide.
西南的风一直吹，穿过白天和黑夜。我想问，这段旅途何时才是终点？西南的风它一直吹。听不清风中的回忆，家门前那棵树已长大，还是那故乡的云，无忧无虑，还是父母的双臂。千遍 少小离家老大回。香烟无改鬓毛衰。儿童相见不相识。笑问何从何处Well, I've been afraid of changing 'cause I build my life around you. But time makes you bolder, even children get older, and I'm getting older too. 西南的风 take it down 吹，穿过白天的 turn around。我想穿透绿线的snow-covered hill， 西南的 landslide he brought me down， and I saw my reflection in the snow-covered hills. Till the landslide brought me down.
Just beautiful. Zishi, want to join us over here? That was one of the best covers
Oh,
of
my
a great
God.
song I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was-
that was just
It
so...
was spectacular.
Wow.
And Jishi's gonna come over here and he's gonna tell us who the other musicians are with him that gave us that great performance. Thank you so much for coming in today. Introduce your band members to us and
You
the
got to pull that
audience.
mic down thing a little bit.
Yeah,
Perfect.
perfect.
Who
All
are
right.
these people?
First, thanks for having us here. We have Alex Gao on the vocal.
Hey, Alex.
And we have Penny Thompson-King also on the vocal. We have Harold Sharon on the keys. And we have Hui Weng on the guzheng.
Yeah. Tell us about the guten. I mean, I have not seen that instrument before.
Yeah, definitely. That is a traditional Chinese ancient instrument, I would say. It's been exist more than 3,000 years old.
Wow.
So we're really hearing the sound from like way back, but mixed with modern music.
Speaking of, we're hearing sound from way back. I've been to China a bunch of times. I told you my kids were both born in Changsha. I've never heard jazz or music like that. And I've heard a lot of music in China. Is jazz a major art form in China or no?
Actually, with a lot of Chinese students studying here, then bring jazz back
really?
to China, and then now you found a jazz club in like a second or third tier city. I was shocked when I went back in last year, and a lot of young people love jazz music.
Well, I read where your band members came here to study jazz, and Alex is still at Berkeley, and that's a big thing of people coming here to study and then going home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like Boston, like Berkeley, so many music school connect us to here.
Yeah.
That's how we met. And they have a student like Alex is from Berkeley. Henny, Hui, Haru, Mi, Wei, both faculty either at Berkeley, NEC, or Longji School Music.
Yeah, that's where you are.
Yes.
Yeah. I also read what you talked about when you were a kid, that you started with the saxophone, which obviously you've mastered, and then you stopped for a while, and then you were taking a 10-hour bus ride to go for your lessons. That's devotion.
That's my music education is anything but conventional, I would say.
Yeah.
Because when I grew up in China, there is no saxophone teacher. The reason why I studied saxophone because my mom loved Kenny G so much.
Oh, Kenny
That
G.
is unbelievable, by the way. To me, John Coltrane is one thing, but Kenny G? Okay.
Yeah. So back in that time, I mean, Kenny G is really big, famous in Asia.
I know.
So my mom said, oh, look at this guy with this shiny saxophone. And that's how I started saxophone. But there's no saxophone teacher. I learned from a flute player. So I quit in 6 months.
Yeah, and then we know a little bit about your story. You take a hiatus.
Yeah.
You become like, I don't know, an environmental engineer or something. We were talking about high-tech guys before. And then this high-tech guy, who's no longer with us, Steve Jobs, gives this incredible commencement address at Stanford about 20 years ago that everybody has heard. Here's a little piece that I think inspired you. Here's Jobs.
Your work is going to fill a large part of your life. And the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking and don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it. And like any great relationship, it just gets better and better as the years roll on. So keep looking, don't settle.
What'd that do for you?
Oh my God, I think that clip, that speech really is my turning point in my life because I was doing environment science, but I don't like it. But I don't know what to do next. So I keep looking, and his speech really inspired me. It's like, oh, just keep searching, and your heart will tell you what you truly love. So when I first heard about jazz music, and I started falling in love with this, and I realized, wow, what Steve is talking, click with me. And that's inspired me to really devote myself to this music.
But I was looking at videos of you performing, and it seemed like a couple of times you were performing with what looked like string quartets to me. I mean, it was like all these different jazz and all these different. Were you in the hat shell? It looked like the hat shell too.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not just straight jazz. It's mixed.
Exactly. So I mean, when I was at Berkeley, I was in the jazz composition department. Mostly we focus on big band, traditional jazz setup. But when I was studying Longy school music, it's more classical. And so I have an opportunity to work with a lot of string player, and I realized that's really an opportunity to bring something fresh to the music. And actually, you're going to hear some arrangement tomorrow night with some string quartet in my band.
I want to talk about the Regatta Bar in a second. By the way, if you want to get tickets, it is tomorrow night. You go to Zishi, Zishi music.com, and we are talking to Zishi Liu. What's the Lunar New Year connection? And by the way, we not only like great musicians, musicians who bring gifts.
That's right.
You gave us this beautiful tea, both of us, I should say.
Thank you.
And a red envelope. For people, Shirley Leung, a business columnist for The Globe, explained the red envelope the other day. But if people didn't hear, explain what the red envelope is there.
So definitely. So first of all, Lunar New Year is maybe the most important festival in China or Asian country. It's a time for people, family gathering, enjoy the food, the music, bonding to each other. And the hongbao is given to people, a friend or family member, to show the gesture and the best wishes, like good luck.
Good luck. We need good luck this year.
Yeah. And the fortune and also the number, the 8, represented like everything goes well and I get rich. Hope everything is fine over there.
Well, we hope you do too. So tell us a little bit about the programs, what the tomorrow night's going to be like at the Regatta Bar.
Absolutely. The Regatta Bar, I'm going to play tomorrow night's, I would say, cross-cultural jazz celebration. All the musicians away gathering in Boston here. Jazz is a way to attract us to study here, to work here, but also we share the same heritage. We want to use jazz as a vehicle to explore where this music can take us from, combine where we come from.
And you got an album that you're recording next week? What's that about?
Yeah, so I'm taking the same band, go to studio next week with this great drummer, Francisco Mella. we're going to do some recording, some tune from this album, some tunes from my original composition, and some commission work from with some artists about the climate change.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Fantastic. So you mentioned here.
So that means that Trump will ban the album, obviously. That's a problem.
Maybe, but we'll try to.
I'm always curious that when people decide to embrace music as their full-time career, because it's really hard. But how old were you when you heard that Steve Jobs speech and you went from something you didn't like, the environmental science, to the second?
Yeah.
Were you like 20?
Yeah, I'm like a 22 or 23,
Yeah.
and I almost graduate, still don't like the lab work.
Yeah.
So I think that's taken me time to figure it out.
And you're pretty young now, so it didn't take you that much time.
Well, I've been in the U.S. almost 10 years.
10 years.
Almost 10 years.
That's not bad.
You know, I'm going to say something I say every time someone as talented as you and your fellow players, and so apologies for repeating myself. What reminded me of our colleague Azita showed up a few minutes ago, and while you were playing, she typed me a note and said, "This is exactly what I needed right now." Andres Nelsons, who's the music director of the BSO, whenever he's been on our show, talks beautifully about how, while music is important in all times, it's particularly important in dangerous, troubling, stressful times. And I have to say, I think I may hear you play differently today because of the state of the world than maybe I'd hear you play in happier times. Do you buy that or no?
I think I'm 200% agree with you, because we're living in a world. It's like I would say music. It's really can help what's going through in the world.
Does it do it for you?
Absolutely, and that's why when I do arrangement on this tune, it's like I'm not just like translate the lyric from Steve. I just write from my personal experience to put the Chinese lyrics over there.
Well, you know, the other thing, we don't talk a lot about it, but arranging is such a big deal. And is that your arrangement, or did you do it together? Or because that's hard to do.
Exactly. I mean, that's my arrangement. I get an idea from my friend, actually here, John. He suggests me say pick a
tune. Is that you?
Yeah.
Beautiful job. It's beautiful.
He suggests me to do a tune. It's like well known in US here, but maybe less Chinese people know about that, and reimagine it through your own voice.
Is that going to be on the album?
Yes.
I hope so. I mean, that really was just... You say in an interview, one of your goals is to help business grow and people connect. I understand the people connect part of it.
Yeah.
What's the business grow mean?
I feel like a music industry right now, it's like not that friendly to the artists, to the musicians. Mm-hmm. And I wish musicians, I think we should deserve a better situation.
Oh, the music business, you mean, when you say business?
Like a musician.
I see.
Yeah. I see. And I was talking to my friend Harold this morning. It's like, hey, you should get your website, everything set up, like a business setting to... That's part of music right now, because we live in a digital world. Instead of just playing music, you need to do more. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So what are you going to play for us next?
We're going to play next song. It's called Gong Xi Gong Xi. It's a traditional Chinese New Year song.
Yeah, of course.
And this song is interesting. Yeah, writing in minor, so it sounded like really sad. The story behind that is this song composed is after the Second World War II. China just, finished the war, and people say Gong Xi means congratulations. I would say, congratulations, you survived the war. And that tune composed, I think, in February, winter, saying winter is end, spring, the hope is on the way, hanging there.
And after that, we played Landslide again a couple of times?
Maybe.
Did you arrange this one too?
I get the idea from the great band Pink Martini.
Okay. Oh, Pink Martini. That's great.
The singer, China Folksy from here, from Cambridge, amazing singer. We get idea from there, so that's the tune we're going to do.
So do you want to join your bandmates? And Marjorie will promote, again, the concert tomorrow night at the fabulous Regatta Bar at the Charles Hotel.
Yes, I will. It's going to be, as Jim just said, the Charles Hotel Regatta Bar. For more information and to book tickets, you go to zishimusic.com. I'm going to spell it for you. Z as in zebra, I-S-H-I music.com. Z-I-S-H-I music.com. That's zishimusic.com, and get more info about tomorrow night's concert. And here we go again. Spectacular. You just heard from Zishi Liu and his band performing Gong Gong. They will be performing again. Well, I said that absolutely wrong. Okay. Z-H-E-E.
We know what you meant, Marjorie. It's okay.
Gong Gong said ZZ. I goofed it up. But anyway, you're going to hear him tomorrow night. Again, if you can get to the Charles Hotel Regattabar. For more information and to book tickets, you go to Zishi Music, Leo. Zishi Music, I'm going to spell it for you. Z-I-S-H-I music.com. Z-I-S-H-I music.com. They're going to be at the Regattabar tomorrow night. You can hear all that wonderful music. Again, thank you so much for coming in. After the new news, we're going to talk with Ian Coss. You know him as the man behind GBH's The Big Dig, all about, of course, The Big Dig here. He's out with this brand new podcast from GBH called Scratch and Win. It's about how the puritanical state of Massachusetts somehow managed to have one of the most successful lottery games ever. And we're also going to talk with the legendary longtime lottery live host Dawn Hayes. That's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH.
Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break here on GBH News 89.7.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Nora Rahm. Federal investigators have retrieved the cockpit voice and flight data recorders from the American Airlines jet that collided with an Army helicopter Wednesday night south of Washington, D.C. 67 people died. NPR's Frank Langford reports.
The so-called black boxes will allow investigators to hear the final conversations in the cockpit before the two aircraft collided over the Potomac River. They'll also provide crucial data, including the altitude of the plane leading up to and at the time of the collision. Officials tell NPR that the Black Hawk was supposed to be flying no higher than 200 feet, while sources say it was flying at least 100 feet higher. Meanwhile, members of the crew of the American Airlines jet have been identified. They include First Officer Sam Lilly, a second-generation pilot who was engaged to be married. Frank Langford, NPR News.
The governors of Georgia and Mississippi have identified two of the Black Hawk helicopter pilots who died Wednesday. A U.S. military official says the Army will not release the name of the third pilot at the request of her family. President Trump's nominee to be Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Author of the study at Mayo told NPR previously their research did show a more robust immune response in African Americans, but did not find evidence of increased side effects, and that any claim of increased vulnerability is not supported by the science. Will Stone, NPR News.
President Trump has said he'll impose steep tariffs as early as tomorrow on imports from Canada and Mexico if those two countries don't do more to stop illegal drugs and unauthorized migrants from entering the U.S. NPR's Scott Horsley reports this could result in higher prices, including the cost of gasoline.
Especially in the Midwest, oil refineries there are heavily dependent on crude oil from Canada. Those refineries are optimized for the kind of heavy sour crude that Canada produces, which is different than the light sweet oil that we produce a lot of in this country. So it's not an easy switch to make. President Trump says he wants to see lower oil and gasoline prices in this country. He's counting on that to help cut other prices. But a trade war with Canada would likely have the opposite effect.
NPR's Scott Horsley reporting. At last check on Wall Street, the Dow was up 7 points, the S&P up 38. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. An elite ice skating club in Norwood continues to grieve the loss of 6 members of its community following that collision between a plane and a military helicopter Wednesday night in Washington, D.C. GBH's Craig LeBolt reports that 2 teenage skaters from the club, their mothers, and 2 coachers were all killed in that crash.
The ice here at the Skating Club of Boston is usually buzzing with activity,
But it was silent as 1956 Olympic champion Tenley Albright, for whom this rink is named, spoke to reporters. 13-year-old skater Gina Hahn, 16-year-old Spencer Lane, both of their mothers, and married coaches Vadim Novov and Zhenya Shishkova, a former world champion pairs team, were among the 67 lives lost.
I picture them right here. The coaches always stood at that entrance. The skaters just flew all over the ice, doing remarkable things.
The loss is tragically reminiscent of a 1961 plane crash that killed the entire U.S. figure skating team. In Norwood, Craig Lamult, GBH News, 89.7.
A minister from Fitchburg getting credit from Massachusetts lawmakers for the recent recognition of Rosa Parks Day here in Massachusetts. The Telegram and Gazette reports that it took Reverend Will D'Arcangelo 3 attempts to get the support needed from lawmakers. Rosa Parks died in 2005 at the age of 92. Massachusetts will honor the civil rights pioneer on her birthday coming up next week, February 4th. Celtics in New Orleans tonight. We've got rain in the forecast for the remainder of the day, 44 degrees. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from ARM, committed to delivering innovative, advanced computing designed to enable worldwide companies to unleash the capabilities and experiences of AI. The future of AI is built on ARM. ARM.com. This is NPR.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. So after winning a Peabody Award for his GBH News podcast, The Big Dig, podcast producer Ian Coss is back with a brand new limited series centered on another key aspect of Massachusetts life, the wildly successful, we'll discuss what successful means in a few minutes, state lottery. The podcast is called Scratch and Win. First 2 episodes are out now wherever you listen to podcasts. Episode 1 is now available on our own podcast feed, and they drop every Wednesday. Is that right? That's what you told me?
That's right.
Episode 3. Okay. Ian, we're happy Ian's here, but let's tell the truth. We're wild about the other guests. Dawn Hayes is here. And if you're hearing that name saying, where do I know that woman from? This may help jog your memory. Here it is.
Now, live on WBZ4, tonight's drawing of Megabucks.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dawn Hayes. I'm Dawn Hayes. I'm Dawn Hayes. Welcome to Lottery Live on Board. It's time for Megabucks. Tonight's jackpot is estimated at $3 million. $2.5 million. $15 million. Let's take a look and see if you'll be our next Megabucks millionaire.
Ian and Dawn, congratulations and welcome to Boston Public Radio.
Thank you so much.
Before we even start, I just want to say,
What a
where's Jamie?
montage.
Jamie is our lead producer,
Who's at
Dawn.
the montage?
When he was 9 years old, he said to his grandmother, I want to marry that woman. And you were that woman. I want you.
That's right.
There's Jamie right there.
That's right.
Love you, Jamie.
He fell in love with you when he
And
was
maybe
in the
you
third
too,
grade.
Ian, but not then, whatever. So.
Okay. So, Ian, tell us what you're doing here.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is explain what to me is a strange mystery. I grew up in Massachusetts. I played scratch tickets since I was a kid. I didn't know until fairly recently that Massachusetts operates what is widely considered the gold standard of American lotteries. And what I mean by that is that we have the strange distinction of spending more per capita on lottery tickets than any other state, and it's not even close, right? It's
Fill in that blank, if you would, for us. It is stunning.
Okay, so if you just look at sales per adult, right? Lottery sales per adult, and you kind of map out the states, you get a spread, as you'd expect. There's a lot of states in the kind of like the $200, $300, $400 range. That's $400 per adult of lottery tickets sold every year. In Massachusetts, it's over $1,000, okay? Over $1,000 of lottery sales per adult. And you figure there's a few zeros averaged into that, right?
Exactly right.
So there's some very, very large numbers averaged in as well. And when I learned that, it seemed so strange to me. It didn't really fit with a lot of the image I had of my home state. And I just got interested in why is that? And that's really the question we're trying to answer in the series.
I thought you said it was all about the Catholics and bingo.
That is part of it.
That's a great story. Do you want to share that with us for a minute too, Ian?
This was another tidbit that I never saw coming, but if you look at the original lottery states, New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey, where the whole lottery phenomenon started, and then you look at the demographic breakdown of states by religion, they line up almost perfectly, and that the original lottery states are all heavily Catholic.
There you go.
And so there is a deep kind of cultural religious connection there between Catholicism and a kind of tolerance for legal gambling, which again, Massachusetts, a very heavily Catholic state, makes perfect sense that we would have one of the first lotteries and one of the biggest.
As opposed to the Protestants, you say, who...
The Puritans.
Right. Well, you figure the classic Protestant work ethic. Well, what's the antithesis of working hard for your pay at the end of the day? Well, I don't know.
What are the great lines? What are the great lines? You're going to tell me who said it because I've forgotten. But the Catholics have children, the Protestants have dogs.
Yes.
Okay, who said that?
That quote is from Mayor Michael Curley.
Okay.
That's a way back reference in Boston politics. I heard it from a fellow named Larry DeCara.
Larry DeCara, okay.
Yeah.
Former city councilor.
That was
now,
great.
Dawn, you're going to be in a later episode we haven't heard yet. But can we go back to those thrilling days of yesteryear? How'd you get that job that everybody, when I say everybody, if you're really young, you don't know this, everybody saw Dawn at night on television. How'd you get the job?
It was actually amazing. I mean, I'm sure there are a number of people in our audience that auditioned for it as well. But long story short, back in the day, every 3 years, the lottery had to go out for bid to the stations. So it was at one station, and then WNEV wanted to get it. So they did this huge cold call where about 4,000 people came out to various parts of the state. I went to the Westin right up the street here and auditioned, and from 4,000 it went down, long story short, to 26.
4,000?
Yeah, there were psychological tests. They would call our boss at the time. I was working for WVBF as the assistant to the CEO, and got down to 16. We had the finals at the Westin, and I was the first runner-up. I did not win. A woman named Andy Waugh, people may remember.
Would you kneecap her, or what'd you do? What'd you do?
Well, no, but I paid close attention and started doing a little freelance work for the station at the time. She did it for a year, and it didn't quite work out.
Oh, I didn't know this.
filled in for her.
Funny coincidence.
It is.
It didn't work out.
Yeah.
Wonder why she got sick.
And then you got it.
And then I got it.
How many years did you do that thing?
About 18.
One of my closest friends, who obviously passed away, it was Chet Curtis, who obviously was huge.
Yes,
Chet and I would walk down the street, and I don't care if you're 15 or 115, he was stopped by people. That was what your life had to be like.
It was
Did it not?
awesome. It was awesome. I don't know if you remember back in the day, the Q rating.
Oh, sure, of course.
So at one
Explain
point,
what the Q rating is to the audience.
The Q rating is, they used to have, what would you call it?
It's like a recognizability?
Yes.
And favorability with the public of
right.
celebrities and high-profile people.
Exactly. So Chet and Natalie, those types would be like 1 and 2, but I ended up being number 3 for a while.
Wow.
So number 3, I'm so...
Well, it's so funny because last night, our coworkers sent us pictures, our stuff for today, and I looked at the video, I said, my God, I've seen this woman hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. Because if anybody in your family, Channel 4, they had the Wheel of Fortune, it would be every single night.
Yep.
You'd have a new outfit every single night.
Yep.
And we were all very excited watching the little numbers twirl around. But you couldn't play, I bet, could you?
Actually, I could.
You could?
Because I worked for the station. I did not work for the lottery. So lottery employees could not play. But it was the happiest job. It was an awesome job. I really loved it.
So we're going to get back to you because I think a lot of people, including me, I want to know what you're doing now that you're not doing that lottery thing at night. I was not aware that we weren't the first lottery until I heard episode 1. Mm-hmm. I was also not aware that the scratch ticket was not what lottery started with.
Yep.
And you do these wonderful interviews with this guy who created the first scratch ticket.
Yep.
Let's say, is it Koza? Is how he says?
Yep.
Josh Koza. We'll play a little sound so you get a feel for the guy. And
John
then
Koza.
Oh, John Koza. My apologies. And then fill in some blanks. Tell us how it came about. Here is John Koza, creator of the first scratch ticket ever.
Now, mind you, this was the very first ticket. As you can see, it was not very artistic.
Yeah, I mean, the first ticket looks more like a receipt or something. It's not
a receipt. Yeah, that's
it's
right.
not very glamorous looking at all.
It's not glamorous at all. Very boxy and wordy. It says 1 in 5 tickets wins. and then it says using edge of coin, rub square spot at right, and a number appears. So we had to tell people that.
So tell the story, Ian, briefly, if you can. How did this all come about? How did this guy come about?
Yeah, so if you go back to the early 70s, the first generation of lotteries, what they had were basically weekly drawings, okay? There was no daily drawings on TV. There was no Megabucks, Powerball. And in Massachusetts, they had this thing called The Game. It was literally that generic. It was just The Game, one drawing once a week. And I think part of what you have to remember about those early lotteries is that they were terrified of looking bad. There was so much fear that the lotteries could be infiltrated by the mob, that somebody would rig a drawing, that there'd be some kind of scandal, and the whole thing would get shut down. So nobody wanted to try anything new. Along comes this fellow named John Koza. He works for a game company in Chicago that made what were called supermarket games. It's, you go and you get a little coupon, and it's just like maybe you win a few pennies, and you scratch off some spots and get it. So it's just like a fun gimmick. He comes along and he pitches this idea to all the state lotteries in the early 70s. Now, he goes from state to state, New Jersey, New York, and every state says no because they don't want to try this crazy thing. And then he comes to Massachusetts. And the funny thing is that in Massachusetts, the head of the lottery was actually a mathematician. He was this fellow named Dr. Peralt who loved statistics. He was an avid card player. He used to go and take his children to Las Vegas on family vacations just to study the games, and he was so into it. And he was the one person who saw the potential of it. All the other states just saw the risk, oh my gosh, there's a million ways this could go wrong. And Massachusetts was the one state willing to take a chance on it. And that's how we end up with the first scratch ticket, May 29th, 1974, almost exactly 50 years ago.
I'm not going to give it away, but he didn't get the first contract. Somebody else got the first contract.
There's a few twists and winds to the story.
How he ended up getting the contract, the ultimate contract, is a great story that Ian tells beautifully on Scratch and Win.
But I was telling Ian before we went on the air how you are a big anti-lottery.
I
You
am.
think it's terrible that everybody, people from Chelsea at Port Town spend all the money and they get nothing, and then people in Weston get all the money.
And spend nothing.
The legislature could change that.
They could.
They haven't. But
The distribution part of it they could change.
But the first episode does start off with a kind of a harrowing. It's a great scene of a guy over in Joe's Variety or something, spending his money. So tell us about how it opened.
Yeah, and this was eye-opening for me. When like I said, I grew up playing scratch tickets. My mom would buy them at the gas station. When we do Easter egg hunts.
Yeah.
There would be scratch tickets.
Stocking gifts.
It was that kind of thing for me. And so when I started researching, trying to explain that huge $1,000 per adult figure, I looked up a list of the top lottery retailers in the state, and I figured, let me just go visit and see what's going on. So I wind up at this place called Joe's Market in Quincy, and I go there a few times, and the second time I go, I meet this fellow who did not want to tell me his name, but he was a mechanic, he lived nearby, and he would come in and play these $50 scratch tickets, right, which is now the most expensive scratch ticket you can buy in this country. And he would play one, and then he would go back up, and he'd be like, maybe just one more. And then he would go and he'd scratch it. And the thing that really, one of the things that, and I'm not sure if this is in the podcast or not, but it really opened my eyes, is he wouldn't actually scratch every box. He would just skip right to the bottom. There's a barcode. You can just scratch off the barcode and scan it. And to me, that was someone who had enjoyed scratch tickets, it's a fun game. I realized, okay, it's something else for this guy. And I spent, maybe 20, 30 minutes as he went back and forth to the table, to the counter, to the table, to the counter, spending probably $500 or $600 in the span of his lunch break.
And he said he was trying to get money to retire, and he didn't want his wife to know what he was doing?
That's what he described to me, is that he's been playing for so long at this point that he was not able to save for retirement, and so this is what he's counting on.
Okay, let's not give any more away except to say Marjorie and I, on the second night that Plainview or Plainville was open, we went to the VIP slot room. That's the first slot parlor open in Massachusetts. And Marjorie, who was then working at the Globe or the Herald, started interviewing the one guy in the VIP room who was literally popping $100 bills into these machine, disappeared, Another 100, another 100. Marjorie says, what do you do? I'm an unemployed carpenter.
Yeah.
And he probably dropped $2,000 into that machine that night. Okay, let's get back to you for a second. What do you do? You're not on my TV every night, which is really concerning. What do you do?
What I'm doing is amazing work. I work for a fantastic organization called JVS Boston. I'm the vice president of philanthropy.
Oh,
and
great.
we do workforce development very timely for refugees, immigrants, and marginalized people. We're one of the largest in the state.
How
And
worried are
it's
you? Seriously?
Seriously worried. You know,
Yeah.
it's been a tough week, you know.
Because people are scared?
Because people are scared.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to navigate through that.
JVS, is that the name again?
JVS Boston.
Okay.
Okay,
Can I
let's
get back?
get-
No.
let's-
I want
all
to
right.
get. I have a question for him that
Okay.
you say repeatedly in the first, and I am obsessed with the lottery. Maybe not as much as you now, and I hate every part of it, but I love your storytelling. You call it the most successful.
Yeah.
Now I assume that you don't define it, at least in the first episode. Most successful, I assume, means raises the most money and returns either the greatest amount of money or the greatest percentage of the ticket to cities and towns, which is a good thing to fund cops and firefighters. Is that what you mean by most successful?
I think in some ways I'm trying to be a little
Vague?
provocative
Oh,
and vague
okay.
in using the word successful, because that is a word that it can mean a lot of different things. The way it's usually used in reference to the lottery is that it makes more money per resident than any other lottery. As a
Which
business,
means they lose more money than any other lottery.
Right.
Yeah.
It's complicated, but as a business, which ultimately I think that's how you need to think of the lottery,
Yeah,
is that as a business operating within the state government, it is considered the most successful. And I think I just wanted it, my hope for the series is that, you know, however you feel about it, whether you come to it from a critical mindset or whether you come to it thinking that this is great entertainment, and, you know, I hope that it gives you a chance to kind of sit with that and question for yourself.
Well, by the way, I've only heard 2 episodes, and the answer is it does it already. So I think you're on your way to achieving that goal. It's great.
Okay, we're talking about Scratch and Win. It's this new GBH podcast put together by Peabody Award-winning. That's a big deal there. Ian Coss, who did the Big Dig podcast, which I also just adored. If you love politics around Massachusetts, you're going to love this one too. And we're also talking with Dawn Hayes, that everyone would recognize because she was on television every night of the week. Was it every night of the week, or just was it weekends too?
I was 5 days.
5 days a week, okay. Talking about who won the lottery that night. So I want to know, okay, what was this job like? You show up, you look gorgeous, you have a beautiful outfit on, and then you go home, or what was the deal? I mean, how long was your work day?
As opposed to what, go out and get drunk?
Well, I want to know. I used to think, did she do something else, or is this what she did? It was a pretty good gig.
It was a fabulous gig.
And then would you go like to lottery events and meet people?
Absolutely. As the spokesperson entailed much more than just the TV
That's what I
aspect.
figured. Yeah.
We would travel. We would go to different shops and stores and dealers and give away tickets. And in the middle of all that was a 3-year game show called Bonus Bonanza. I don't know if you remember that.
That's right.
Which I co-hosted with Brian Tracy.
That's right.
So,
Did you ever stand with one of those big, huge checks? You know,
absolutely. We gave away more money. That's why I was thrilled to come when Ian called me. I was like, I'm happy to talk about it. It was a great gig. It made people happy.
It did.
Well, that's one of the things you were talking about. Bob Crane, who's no longer with us, used to be the state treasurer, as you pointed out, real showman. You know, you had a great interview about him with the late great Jack Connors, who just passed away a little while ago. But that was one of the enticements, apparently, for for Crane. He wanted to give away these checks and make people happy.
Absolutely, yeah. And Bob Crane, for folks who, you know, don't remember him or maybe too young to remember him, he's such a fascinating character in state political lore.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was a showman. He was the son of a vaudeville entertainer, or his father worked as a behind-the-scenes tech person for vaudeville shows, and that was his world, was song and dance. And so when he was, you know, tasked with running the lottery, I think he understood more so than most states. It's entertainment.
That's right. It's entertainment.
You play at least twice, I think, in the first 2, him singing "You Made Me Love You,"
Yes.
and I've seen him on video singing at Bill Bolger's, St. Patrick's Day breakfast in South Boston. But just sitting and listening, it was really it's almost beautiful in an odd sort of way. It's really
Well, we should tell the great story.
Well, no, we shouldn't.
We shouldn't.
I think.
About the
why don't you
stickers?
ask the guy if he wants to give it away?
You want to tell the sticker story?
Or do you want people to listen?
Oh, sure. I'm happy to tell.
Oh,
Tell the
great,
sticker
then
story.
tell.
I
It's
love this.
fabulous.
Because Frank Phillips, Renee Loth from the Globe, I heard them both talking about
And
this.
Larry
They're both-
DeCara, right? Is
Larry
that-
DeCara.
you mix them all,
All
yeah.
politicians, and well, Frank Phillips and Renee Loth, the reporters. But
And our current Secretary of State.
Oh, Bill Galvin. That's right.
Bill
I'm sorry.
Galvin,
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So this is a story, I should preface it by saying it may be entirely apocryphal, but it is part of the lore. So the lore is that Bob Crane was a state rep in Brighton. He was running for re-election. And that year, it was 1960, and so he goes off and he campaigns for Jack Kennedy. He's figured, my race is safe, I'm fine, I'll go help Kennedy get elected. His fellow Irish Catholic Pole, right? And so, meanwhile, there's a challenger in his district who decides, I can take this guy. Runs as a write-in candidate, okay? Crane never sees it coming. Day of the election, it is extremely close, okay, with this write-in candidate. It goes for a recount. The ballots are stored for the weekend in a school or maybe a church in Brighton, and this is where the accounts start to differ. I got various accounts of this. And as the story goes, Crane knew the person who was the overnight custodian at this church or school, turned up the heat to say 80, 90 degrees. The glue on the ballots with these, the write-in candidates used to give out stickers.
So you just stick them onto the ballot rather than having to write out the name.
To make sure that the spelling is right. So all these ballots with the write-in candidate have a sticker on them. You turn up the heat, the glue starts to melt, the stickers fall off, they recount, voila, Bob Crane wins.
I hope it's true.
We have a little sound from...
and I have that straight from Secretary Galvin, with the asterisk that it may be entirely false, and Crane always denied it.
You know what you do beautifully, too, by the way? The fact that you have all three of them interspersed telling the same story is really beautiful.
Great. Well, it truly was a game of telephone. So the first person who told it to me was Renee Loth at
Former
the Globe.
editorial page editor.
And she was like, I heard this story once. I heard it from Frank Phillips. You should talk to him.
Former State House bureau chief.
So I talked to Frank Phillips, and he's like, well, I really heard the story from Bill Galvin. You should talk to him.
That's great.
So I put in a request with the secretary's office and got it from him. And then the trail kind of went cold from there.
It was a great story. In any case, here is from the podcast, business mogul Jack Connors, who just died a few months ago, who, speaking of philanthropy, was one of the great philanthropists in our time, and big ad guy, describing his longtime friend, State Treasurer Bob Crane.
When you think about the job of state treasurer, you're thinking about a banker. Bob was not a banker. Bob was a people guy. Bob was a showman. Bob was an entertainer. He never saw a camera he couldn't fall in love with.
So, what are we going to hear? What stories you're telling in the next 6 episodes?
Can I say just something quickly about Jack Connors?
Oh, sure, of course.
I just wanted to say, you mentioned Jack Connors passed away this year. And I want to give a lot of credit to Jack Connors and also to Don and so many of the folks who worked within the lottery for taking the time to talk about this story. Because I understand, as we talked about before, this remains a controversial topic. And there were a lot of people, including the Lottery Commission itself, that refused to talk to me about it, that just see this as like a no-win situation to even talk about.
That drives me nuts.
And so I just want to, again, recognize Don, Jack Connors, a lot of the other folks who did talk to me who believe that it's worth having the conversation.
Is that a stigma kind of thing about gambling? Is that what it is?
I think the stigma and the fact that, that they're worried about this coming across as a hit job on the lottery, and that I'm just out to criticize what they do.
Okay.
No, I'll just criticize what they
So-
do. You just
You're
tell the
out to do a
story.
hit
So,
job on the
Don,
lottery.
so I want to know, so they paid for your outfits, I hope.
Yeah, it evolved over the years.
Yeah,
But
okay.
yes,
Because you had some great outfits.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
you always look
Nina.
fantastic.
These are the important things.
Okay, can you two
Absolutely.
talk after the show? Okay.
I'll take this offline.
What's going to happen in the final 6 episodes? What are you giving us?
Okay, so we're going to trace it all the way through the 70s and 80s. We have the debut of the first numbers game. We've got a whole episode about organized crime, and if anyone remembers the Angiulo brothers.
Oh, the Angiulo brothers too.
Whitey Bulger.
I drew that number.
You did?
I drew that number.
Oh, Mike, wait a minute. Which one?
This is
Angiulo
the
or
Bulger
Whitey?
brother?
Whitey, where he had to take a ticket from
Bulger
the other
one.
friend
That's
of his.
right.
Yeah.
I remember
Can't
that
wait.
incident when they went and got that.
But go ahead, Ian. What else?
We've got a whole episode about state finances, Proposition 2.5, which you'll probably remember.
I think I do.
We've got a whole episode about advertising for the lottery. Got a whole episode about state politics. I don't know if you remember the 1986 race between Treasurer Crane and Joyce Hampers.
Oh my gosh!
How about that for a blast from the past?
Blast from the past.
So we've got there are a bunch of twists left in the story, and again, we're kind of chasing that question of how did Massachusetts get to number one in sales? Because it was not right away. It took a lot of effort and a lot of twists and turns.
Now, Kelly from Woburn says, Dawn Hayes taught me how to ride a motorcycle.
Woo!
Is that true?
Really?
I did, yeah. I am a certified motorcycle
You
safety
are.
instructor, nationally certified.
Wow.
Okay, well, we can't get enough of you. Here is, from the podcast in the future, here is Ian interviewing Dawn about, well, you'll hear what it's about. Here are Ian and Dawn.
Lottery drawings were held in prime time, right after Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy.
So it was the hottest time slot.
And so long, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning us in. Big finale tomorrow on Jeopardy.
Once that red light went on, you're open to the world. I'm in your living room.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Dawn Hayes, and welcome to Lottery Live. Well, you made it. It's Wednesday, and the weekend is in sight. Hopefully the weather...
I even remember the music.
I remember the music. It was like a blast from the past.
Were you about to say one last thing, Ian?
No, I'm good.
Oh, you're good? You're great.
Thank you.
The first
Thank you so
two
much.
episodes of this are just, I don't care if you care about the lottery or not, it's a huge thing in our lives in Massachusetts. Listen to it. It's brilliant. You really did a great job,
And
Ian. You and your
congratulations,
colleagues.
4,000
Great.
people, and you beat them all. I mean, that's
right?
really impressive.
That's the real story here. And that's coming up in episode 6.
It is, episode
Oh,
6.
good.
We'll
Oh,
be
good.
there.
You got
Oh,
the
good.
whole Dawn story in
Okay.
there, so stay tuned.
We have been
Thank you.
speaking
Great
with
to see you
Peabody
both.
Award-winning
Thanks so much.
podcast producer, the man behind the Big Dig podcast with GBH, as well as this new one, Scratch and Win, and of course the longtime host of Lottery Live, Dawn Hayes. Thank you both
Thank
so
you
much
so
for
much.
coming
Thank
in.
you.
This is
Great to
really
see you
fun.
both.
Okay, the first 2 episodes of Scratch and Win are out now, available wherever you get your podcast, and episode 1 is in our BPR podcast feed today, so you can check it out there. Okay, after a quick break, we're going to talk with Boston Medical Center's Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett. She's here. She's going to talk about bird flu. She's going to talk about what it could mean if RFK Jr. is chosen to run the Health and Human Services, what that's going to mean for our health, and a lot of other medical issues. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Since taking office, President Trump has already fired people who prosecuted him.
Are we now going to be in a cycle of every change in administration? There's retribution against those who took positions, you disagreed with.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. More on the upheaval at the Justice Department on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And American Repertory Theater, presenting The Odyssey. From the Cyclops to the Sirens, audiences can experience this cultural touchstone's mythical adventures like never before. February 9th through March 16th, amrep.org. Elevate your brand and support local journalism with a GBH sponsorship. Your custom sponsorship package can include audio, video, digital, and events. Learn more at gbh.org/sponsorship.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Joined now at the library by Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett, Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at Boston Medical Center, Associate Professor at BU Medical School, and an Aspen Institute Health Innovators Fellow. Doctor, it's great to see you as always. Thanks for being here. You have to move your mic up just a little.
Thank you very much for being here.
Perfect. That's good.
All right,
Yep,
little
thank you.
operation here.
That's great.
So I was thinking of you as I've watched and listened to testimony from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. About his vaccine skepticism, if you want to be kind about it and all these crazy ideas about healthcare and HIV and everything else. What is, if he becomes the head, if he gets confirmed to take care of healthcare, what's your biggest fear? What could he mean to you and your patients?
Yeah, I have a number of fears, and actually one of your lead producers here said, "Oh, we were having so much fun, and now we have to talk about Kennedy." So
Yeah.
I apologize to be such a downer, but so I'm sure your listeners and everybody here is aware. There's been this week has been full of kind of cross-examination of RFK Jr. If he were to be nominated for head of Health and Human Services, he would be running a $1.8 trillion budget that would be overseeing the CDC and the FDA and as well as Center for Medicare and Medicaid. It has been an incredibly challenging several days, 2 weeks, I think, for folks in healthcare, but particularly, I think, those of us who have been on the front lines during the pandemic and also are seeing the repercussions and the fallout of people's mistrust in vaccines. It has become incredibly alarming to see somebody who, despite his what he's saying now on cross-examination, saying, he never said he was anti-vax. We know he has a 25-year history of leading an organization that has been very much on the front lines of pushing out false information about vaccines and has been responsible. There's, indirectly, if not directly, for a large outbreak of measles in Samoa. And even,
they killed about 7 dozen people.
Yes, and mostly children. Mostly children. Samoa, is an extreme case where there were already low vaccinations because people didn't live near healthcare centers, and yet RFK Jr.'s visit was sponsored by an anti-vax group, and he also has a responsibility as a well-known name to be carrying forth information that is true. So, all that being said, is there is a huge amount of concern that the lack of vaccination that's already happening in our country, which, we are, us in science, we're very much for finding out rigorous data, making data transparent, making sure that people have the data as soon as it becomes available. Part of that happens, again, through CDC, which is now has a gag order on it for the last 2 weeks to give out any data information that's coming out around up-to-date scientific evidence. And so to think that somebody who, first of all, has such a long history of anti-vaccination and is really supported by this MAHA movement around, it's sort of said moms, but family members and folks who really don't believe in vaccination for their children may in fact be responsible for what can be approved or mandated for schools is so concerning. It is really even hard to say how troublesome it is.
Well, the thing is, I was just going to say, the thing is, I think it's so scary to people that measles you get pretty sick with, mumps, all these things you get pretty sick with. But if you are someone that is, you're a kid who's getting cancer treatments, or you have some other immune problem, or you're some person that can't be
deadly.
It's deadly.
It's deadly.
It could kill you.
Yeah.
That what is to me the worst part of this. It's
And I just to put it in very plain language, look, vaccinations have been, I've said this before, the cornerstone of public health. It is one of the greatest breakthroughs we have in public health. It has always been seen as a collective effort. It has never been seen as a right of individuals or a libertarian kind of perspective. And yet, unfortunately, through the last 10 years, as we know, it has become politicized to a point where people think that they, by being asked to be vaccinated, they're being put upon and their rights are being infringed upon. And we're saying, let's make sure that everybody has the right to live a healthy and safe life, so that everybody collectively can make sure that they're safe and vaccinated.
In Caroline Kennedy's wonderful video, one of the fabulous and courageous things she said is this my cousin is misrepresented, lied, and cheated his way through life. And that's what he did through 2 days of hearing, lying about everything. One of the things we talked about the other day was mifepristone, which we know has been safer, as who said this, someone the other day, safer than Tylenol. He says, I want to re-examine it, and said, I will do whatever the president instructs me to do. At the end of this thing, settled science doesn't mean anything to him. And I want, in that vein, Maggie Hassan, a senator from New Hampshire, former governor. We don't hear from her much. She's a lower, she doesn't seek the limelight. She was incredible. She got emotional at this Thursday hearing as she was talking about her son's struggles with cerebral palsy and accused Kennedy, I think totally accurately, of trying to relitigate settled science. Here's just a little bit of Senator Hassan.
Now, some of you are new to this committee and new to the Senate, so you may not know that I am the proud mother of a 36-year-old young man with severe cerebral palsy. And a day does not go by when I don't think about what did I do when I was pregnant with him that might have caused the hydrocephalus that has so impacted his life. So please do not suggest that anybody in this body of either political party doesn't want to know what the cause of autism is.
I thought she was absolutely great, and it was incredible. And by the way, we should add, we've said it a few times, that it bears mentioning, arguably two of the most important things that government does in this country, Medicare and Medicaid. If you watch the hearings, and I know you Trump supporters don't like to hear this, he had no idea what the difference was. He was talking about high premiums and deductibles in Medicaid, which is not true. He confused Medicare with Medicaid, and this is the guy who's going to be in charge of programs that serve a huge majority of the American people.
And the other thing that we should say about these hearings is that Kash Patel, who wants to run the FBI, and Tulsi Gabbard, who wants to be in charge of intelligence, and Kennedy, when they were asked about things, they said they didn't say it. And then the senators would have the transcript of what exactly they said.
Or play it.
And they still, they played it. And they still denied it. So it's crazy. And one last thing. With autism, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think autism has become quite common. But babies start out to be okay, and then something happens along the line, which I think is what led to so many parents being confused, because I think my baby seemed okay at 2 months, my baby seemed okay at 4 months. So explain that.
Well, there was one study that came out from England that tried to correlate the MMR vaccine with autism. And that study has been debunked by numerous scientific studies showing that there's absolutely no link between MMR vaccine and autism. What happened is there was a group of moms in this case. Actually, there's a story that was in the Times yesterday. There's a great story where it was just one woman who showed up with files and files and waited outside of RFK's Cape Cod kind of home, and waited for him to come back from a fishing trip. And he finally said, okay, I'll sit down with you. He looked through the documents and then said, oh, I'm really interested about this link. And then, really became the spokesperson supporting this idea that autism was caused by MMR. It is absolutely true that we have a rising number of kids with autism in our communities. We absolutely still don't greatly understand it. It is thought to have likely some sort of genetic component. So, it is likely that it happens in utero. We don't know why autism happens. Part of it is why we're seeing rising rates is because we're screening routinely now. We didn't always used to screen. When I see children who come in, there are a number of things that I need to do to screen. And one of them is saying, does your child stare off? Do they not look at you? Do they, there's a number of things that we know now show us that a child may have autism that we didn't look for earlier. So it's not necessarily that there are rising rates of autism, rather that there is a higher level of diagnostic accuracy. So that's really important to understand. But there is, again, in no scientific evidence is there a cause that between any vaccine and autism. And that has to be debunked. And actually, Kennedy yesterday or 2 days ago said, he never said that. And then they said, but would you be willing to say that autism is not caused by vaccines, and at that, he did not answer.
Can we move to another policy coming out of the Trump administration? What is it, 12 days, 11 days, something?
It's hard to keep track.
Which affects you and the people you serve for a living. This mass deportation thing, we talked about yesterday. There was a great story in the Globe about how a lot of kids in a lot of school systems are not showing up because they believe, because their parents who are undocumented are concerned that if the kid goes to school, the kid might get grabbed, or if the kid's at school, they might get grabbed and separated from the kid. What's the impact on undocumented people seeking health care?
It's huge, we saw this in 2017. I think it's actually, I know it's much worse already right now because of the swift action that Trump's presidency and leadership has taken since inauguration. Actually, I just had a patient yesterday who was telling me that her husband, who's from the DR, already starting in December, isn't leaving his home. If he does go out, he makes her go first from wherever they are, and to text him if it's safe to go to the car. We already are hearing people not showing up to our clinic. We have a wonderful refugee clinic that has had amazing outcomes, and the funding has been cut for that already in this last week. Part of what we know works and what we are working to do is putting signs out in our clinic. For instance, we're putting a sign out saying, "You are safe here. This is a healthcare zone." So really being clear about where ICE is not allowed to come. Telling our patients their rights. So even if they are asked their refugee or their immigrant status, they do not have to answer these questions. We know that we as healthcare providers are not to document somebody's status, even though their charts should be HIPAA protected. We still can't trust that that will always be true, and so that is what we're moving forth on. And yet, we know that there's still going to be fear and anxiety. So you work on the individual level. You also make sure that people can have access to telehealth. And we work with people like Attorney General Andrea Campbell, who's been phenomenal and out front right away working on these issues.
When you said that this is a safe zone, is the people like Homan, Mr. Tough Guy, leading the Border Czar guy, do they acknowledge, because they don't say you can't go into schools or churches anymore, do they agree that they don't go into healthcare facilities?
Hospitals are meant to be safe zones,
and
documented safe zones.
And the Trump people
the what is acknowledged and what isn't, this is all new terrain.
Sure it is.
I'm telling you, historically, this has been the case, and we are working on historical precedent and having to react every moment that something shifts.
You know, I think I mentioned this to you, or I know I've mentioned on the air, and I'm going to do it again. I apologize, because this speaks to the lives of people who are just like us, except weren't born here.
Yeah.
This is written by Danielle Offrey in the New York Times about a week ago, and she's talking about a friend of hers who was a doctor in a clinic, and the patient writes to the doctor, her friend, the patient, I'm reading from the New York Times, the patient had diabetes and suffered from rotator cuff tendonitis, which makes reaching backward quite painful. Quote, "If there's any possibility you can write a letter," the patient asked, "stating that if they handcuff me, they can please handcuff me with my hands in front of me." I mean, it's just one of the most painful couple of sentences I've ever read in my life. But that's how desperate and scared people are.
And again, the number of stories I already am receiving over this past week, and all those stories that I will never receive because people are not showing up. And I won't know who's not getting care because they're afraid to show up.
One last thing. Is there outreach coming from your place, either your office, the institution itself?
Yes.
It is. Oh, great.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Good.
So we hear more and more about dead birds.
Oh, yeah.
From around Massachusetts,
Yes, I know.
which is believed to be linked to bird flu. So what about bird flu, and is this involved in these shutdowns of pauses of federal research or money or what?
Positive communicate, the gag orders you're talking about.
The gag order, certainly we would learn more about what's happening with avian flu were there not a gag order on CDC. So CDC puts out this MMWR report where we get anything that, tells us about outbreaks and tracks these things in communities and federally. So avian flu, people are probably tracking it. There's actually a recent piece that just came out yesterday that's saying anywhere from 500 to 1,000 wild birds in Massachusetts are thought to have died from avian flu. Interestingly, they attribute this, in fact, to it being so cold that the little pockets where birds can kind of congregate are smaller and smaller, which I think is really not surprising. I don't know if any of you have been out looking. I know in Jamaica Pond there's tiny little thawed area
and
where
they're
it
all
seems
there.
like dozens and dozens
Cuddled.
of bird are cuddled, exactly, trying to get warm. And so we do know that more wild birds are dying. We still have not seen a wild uptick in human contagion. I think that people probably are aware there's one documented death from avian flu, and that was in an older person with other chronic diseases. We've seen up to 80 people who have gotten bird flu, but those are people who have direct contact with birds.
So there's no human to human as far as we know?
No human to human that we know of. But we also know that the more humans that get it, the more likelihood there will be, changes in the virus, and it will be potentially a more dangerous virus and potentially create another widespread outbreak.
And you
of a
mentioned
virus.
not being able to get the information because the gag order in the CDC.
Correct.
Now, why a gag order in the CDC? The bird flu can that seems to be
I don't think there's any proposition that is linked to DI. Look, when a new government comes in or administration, they want to have control about the message that goes out. But this control of message is much longer than we anticipated. It's going until tomorrow, February 1st. And likely, will then also really have to be spearheaded by RFK Jr. So
this is the no censorship administration censoring their own agencies from informing the public about public health risks. I mean,
and not to mention, everything that's local is global, right? And now we're not going to be part of WHO. So we're not going to get any data from what's happening internationally. So there's a lot of us that are working very hard to create our own internal databases and sources of communication with each other. But this is not how we want to spend our energy. There's so much work to do in healthcare and in public health. So we don't want to be having to reinvent the wheel. But we really are working to keep those sources of communication open.
We're so glad you're there. Doctor, it's great to see you as always. Be well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Doctor, for coming in. We've been speaking with Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett, Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at Boston Medical Center, Associate Professor at BU's Medical School, and an Aspen Institute Health Innovator. Okay, we're going to keep talking a little bit about the same subject after the 1 o'clock news. But right now, two more things for Jim and me. That's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
This week on Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, some Rhode Island senators are questioning the state Senate president's capabilities. Cape Cod residents divided over the president's offshore wind declarations, and Maine Republicans celebrate a pardoned January 6th rioter. All that and more on our regional news roundtable. That's Under the Radar with me, Callie Crossley, Sunday night at 6 here on 89.7 GBH and the GBH app.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Supermicro and NVIDIA, accelerating AI with a wide range of AI servers and the NVIDIA AI Enterprise software platform. Supermicro is committed to driving AI infrastructure breakthroughs with rack-scale innovations. And the University of Massachusetts Amherst, United around a vision for public access to revolutionary education, UMass Amherst gives students the opportunity to seek solutions to the challenges of today. Learn more at umass.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Margery Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/.com. Yeah, exactly, Jim. /GBH News. You have a couple of minutes left until the top of the hour, which means it's time for our relatively new segment called Two More Things. Margery will start with one more thing.
Well, I got a kick out of Alex Beam's column today in the Boston Globe because he was talking about the last gasps in the United States of the so-called monoculture. And that's when we all used to see the same news on TV. Everybody back in the 90s, everybody watched Friends, or a million years ago when we were kids, everybody watched the Dick Van Dyke Show and all that kind of stuff. Well, he's saying there's only a few things left. And one of them, except unless you're Emmett Price, who doesn't watch the NFL because he's a better person than I am, he says the Super Bowl is one example of a shared cultural experience because it checks so many boxes that Americans hold near and dear. Violence, competitive sports, rabid commercialism from the ads, the frenzied entertainment of the halftime show, the online betting that everybody can do, millions of Americans can bet, and in a frisson of sex, because the halftime show could be really pretty sexy.
Frisson?
Frisson.
What does that mean?
A little bit.
A little bit? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Or there could be a wardrobe malfunction. That's the one thing. And the second thing is, and we're going to play a little sound to get you in the mood for this, here's a clip of the second person he says we can all rally around.
Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living.
Hey, who doesn't
That,
love
of
her?
course, is Dolly Parton, who claims to have as many fans as Democrats and Republicans. Jared loves her, Republicans love her. She purports to stay away from talking about politics, but she has something called Dolly tics. And as Alex points out, she's a little bit political because she loves God and she loves gay rights, so she's not totally unpolitical. The third thing he says we all can get around is politics, in the sense that we're all more involved in politics now, but that certainly isn't a monoculture. That's where we're so deeply divided. But that's it.
Two out of three
Dolly
ain't
and the
bad.
Super Bowl, Jim.
Okay, so I'll be brief, or try to be brief. Have you ever encountered in your whole life a person who cares more about himself and less about any other human being than the President of the United States? Yesterday was maybe the best example yet. The bodies had not yet all been recovered from that horrible plane helicopter crash. And rather than doing something like trying to provide some comfort to the families and friends and people who love those 67 people, after doing the moment of silence and that sort of stuff, he does what he does. Since it happened on his watch, he obviously has to blame somebody else. So it's Biden, it's Obama, and it's DEI. And as we said at the top of the show, as we learned, it was a Barack Obama policy that he implemented during his term. But I wanted to quote somebody who nailed it in 2015, and that's actually the father of Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett, David Gergen, who wrote on CNN.com, "How can anyone act so arrogantly and meanly in public life? But in fact, there is a large body of academic and other work that helps to explain. Just Google the literature on narcissistic leadership, and you will instantly recognize Trump, both his bright and dark sides." And Catherine just told me that was with an assist from his wife and her mother, Anne, who is a therapist. But I have to say to you, if you believe in this guy's policies, which you were clearly entitled to do, and close to 50% voted for him, the lack of concern for basic human decency and compassion yesterday was on display. I just urge you to watch it and maybe at least rethink your position.
Well, you know the other part that cracked me up? When one of the reporters at the press conference said to him, "Are you going to go visit the site?"
I know.
And he said, I'm paraphrasing now, he said something like, "What's at the site? The water?" And he made some reference to swimming. I mean, it was just...
Because he cares about no human being other than himself.
Yeah, this is what we got for the next 4 years. So somehow we're going to have
or
to...
8 years or 12 years.
Let's hope.
Or whatever.
Oh, my God.
Okay, fine.
Okay, after the 1 o'clock news, we're going to be joined by the NAACP.
Support your GBH radio listening is by becoming a GBH sustainer. It takes just 2 minutes to enroll and a few dollars a month on your credit card. Small monthly contributions, huge impact. Learn more at gbh.org/sustainer.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Mobile, featuring data options that include streaming, browsing, and texting. More information is available at xfinity.com/mobile. And Subaru of New England. This winter, the all-wheel drive 2025 Subaru Forester is committed to keeping your loved ones safe on snowy roads. You can find your Subaru retailer at SubaruofNewEngland.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH.
I'm Jim Browdy.
HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head of Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. Head of the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers, Michael Curry, zooms in to discuss the real-world, on-the-ground implications of Trump's federal funding freeze chaos, and he'll discuss the political impacts on DEI and what's next for America in this moment.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we'll end the week on ice. And we've been thinking about frozen food wrong this whole time. Scientists say concerns about lower nutritional value.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Nora Rahm. Recovery efforts resumed this morning at the Potomac River, where an Army helicopter and a passenger plane collided Wednesday next to Washington, D.C. All 67 people aboard the two aircraft were killed. D.C. officials say that 41 bodies had been recovered as of last night. Some of the three-person crew of the helicopter have been identified by their home state's governors. NPR's Quill Lawrence reports.
The governors of Georgia and Mississippi have identified two of the Black Hawk crew members killed in the collision. They are Mississippi native Chief Warrant Officer Andrew Eves, whose wife also posted about his death on Facebook and asked for privacy. The other is Georgia native Staff Sergeant Ryan O'Hara. In an extraordinary move, the Army has told NPR it will not announce the name of the third crew member at the request of her family. Misinformation on social media falsely claims the third crew member was a transgender woman.
FAA was recruiting people with intellectual disabilities and significant mental illness for key air safety positions. At his press conference on the deadly crash, Trump then read from that story to back up his inaccurate claim. Joseph Shapiro, NPR News.
Hamas says it will release 3 more hostages tomorrow, including an American citizen. NPR's Daniel Estrin reports from Tel Aviv.
Hamas has released the names of 3 Israeli hostages it says it will release Saturday. One is 65-year-old dual American-Israeli Keith Siegel. His wife Aviva, a former hostage, told NPR last year how she'd react when he'd be freed.
I think I'll scream and just jump on him. I can't wait.
2 other men on the list to be freed Saturday include a 35-year-old father. There's been speculation about the fate of his wife and young children in captivity. Hamas says they were killed. Israel has not confirmed that. Israel has promised to release more than 100 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for the 3 hostages Saturday. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The MBTA is shutting down a significant portion of the Orange Line starting tonight and lasting through Sunday. We have more from GBH's Jeremy Siegel.
The closure between Oak Grove and North Station will let crews work on replacing the Maffa Way and Mystic Bridges along the Boston-Somerville border. Right now, the 2 spans that run above the Orange Line are on their way to being structurally unsound. Workers are revamping them to make sure they're safe and to add new sidewalks and bike access. A repeat shutdown will happen over the President's Day weekend 2 weeks from now. Shuttle buses will replace subway service during both closures. Jeremy Siegel, GBH News 89.7.
Boston City Councilor Tania Fernandez-Anderson, who was indicted in an alleged kickback scheme, says she cannot afford the fees of her current court-appointed attorney, and she wants a payment plan. The Herald reports that the court has ordered Fernandez-Anderson to make a payment of $5,000 to the clerk's office by end of day today. In a motion filed yesterday, her attorney, Scott Lauer, of the Federal Public Defender's Office in Boston, asked that her payment schedule be modified, saying she's unable to pay that full balance at this time. In sports, the Celtics are in New Orleans tonight. The Fleet host New York. In the forecast is raining and rain-free, wet in Watertown. Slight chance of snow overnight, low 34. Then a chance of snow tomorrow as well, high in the low 30s. Sun clouds, 30 on Sunday. 42 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance with Snapshot, which monitors safe driving habits to determine a personalized rate at Progressive.com. Not available in California or from all agents. This is NPR.
It's Friday. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GPH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. How are you?
I just ate a delicious sandwich.
So did I, actually. It was fabulous. What'd you have?
I had the avocado and bacon sandwich. I shouldn't be eating bacon, but I couldn't resist.
I had the ham and something, since you asked. And it was spectacular from the great
No one
Newsfeed
cares what we ate,
Cafe,
Jim.
who, by the way, have wonderful people working there, some of our favorites. Joined now on Zoom by Michael Curry. Michael's the CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, on the board of the National NAACP. Michael, and by the way, he is also the co-chair of the city-led investigation into the impacts of closure of Dorchester's Kearney Hospital, I should mention. Michael, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Good to see you both as well.
So, Michael, first, your healthcare hat. What is this pause in federal spending? Is it paused? Is it not paused? And what's the impact for public health centers all around the Commonwealth?
Well, needless to say, I think many of us in the Commonwealth and Massachusetts and across the country were reeling over the last few days as they made the announcement through the OMB, Office of Management and Budget, a memo saying that they were freezing resources, federal resources. So imagine what that means for a community health center that I represent that draws down federal funds, because many of our health centers are federally funded, and they rely on those funds. Somewhere around 20% of their revenue or more could be federal funds. And they use those funds to make payroll, to contribute to the operations of their services, to pay for their medical staff, their clinical team. And as a result, now you can't draw down those funds and there's a pause. So that was what we were dealing with just 2-3 days ago when the memo came out. And then the state had a pause on the Medicaid system. So not only are grant dollars from the federal government paused, but also the state that receives federal Medicaid dollars had a pause as well. Just imagine what confusion that sent through the healthcare system in the Commonwealth. And we're talking about other programs, other nonprofits that people rely on, food services, childcare, whatever those many other programs. It was unwise. It was disruptive. And quite frankly, it appears that based on the federal court pushback to it, credit to Massachusetts, to those who filed litigation to get a stay on this freeze of federal funds. It appears where we are now is that the Trump administration is saying they still want to go forward with a freeze, although I'm not sure how they would do that since the federal government, since the courts have already stated, and it is unconstitutional. Congress controls the purse, not the president. However, that would have to play out in court. So it appears that they pulled back the memo, but they're still claiming that there's a freeze. We're still concerned. We're still able to draw down money now, as are others, but this could be going on for months. As the ultimate goal here is, and I want to say this because I know I'm taking a little bit of time to answer this question.
It's okay.
In the 1960s, and you've heard me both say this before, in the 1960s, hospitals in this country were segregated. I think that must shock people. Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. That was Martin Luther King's somewhat quote from the 1960s about the segregation of hospitals. However, when Medicaid and Medicare were passed in the 1960s, it required hospitals, in order to get that money, which they all wanted to access to that money and those resources and those patients, had to integrate. So imagine this perverse example now, many years later, that we're dealing with, where now, if you want federal funding, if you want funding and you want to get those dollars, you can't have DEI. You can't have equity programs or health equity programs, stroke programs, maternal health programs for Black women. You can't have trans health. You can't have LGBTQI care, right? Imagine how this is reversed from the 1960s and is being used in this way that quite frankly will result in, and I don't say this as an exaggeration, it will quite frankly kill people, that we're not targeting disease where we need to, and we're not investing in diverse providers and staff. all because of this ideological shift that we're going through now.
Can you remind people for a second, we always, obviously we talk to you frequently, we mentioned you run the League of Community Health Centers. Remind people, or for people who haven't heard you before, who do you serve? How many? Who are these people? Who are your clients? Who are your patients?
Yeah, so I'm super fortunate. I was born and raised in health centers. I grew up in Lenox Street housing projects. I got my care at Whittier Street Health Center. We should be very proud in Massachusetts that the first health center in the country was here in Columbia Point in Dorchester. And now there are 1,400 health centers across the country, 14,000 health center sites across the country, 50 health centers in Massachusetts, almost 285 sites and 1 million patients across the Commonwealth. That's 1 in 7 people in the state get their care at a community health center in rural Mass, North Shore, South Shore, Berkshires, Hilltown, Dorchester, Roxbury, South Boston, and 1 in 2 people get their care at a health center in the city of Boston.
You know, one last thing about this I hadn't thought about, but it's the same question we asked Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett a few minutes ago. You serve, I think, an overlapping constituency to a great degree, and she was talking about the fear that a lot of people are feeling because of the mass deportation threats and not coming for appointments or bringing their kid for appointments for fairly obvious reasons. Are you experiencing that at your centers, Michael Curry?
We are. So, you know, when people are afraid to get care, that's not in the best interest of public health. That's not humane. That is not good public health policy or good, it's not our democracy, but we are in a place now where people, based on their status, may decide to not come and get care. We know that from a pandemic perspective, if we didn't learn anything over the last 4 years, is that, and I use the Dr. King quote, or I morphed the quote, a threat to public health anywhere is a threat to public health everywhere. We need that person to come get vaccinated. We need that person to come get the treatment and the services and the measles shots. And when we scare people and drive them into the shadows, it's just not in any of our best interests. But yes, to your question, folks are now concerned about coming to get care. And it doesn't mean that they're undocumented. Some people who are immigrants are just concerned that they'll be stopped and harassed. And I want to stress this because I don't know if I've ever said this on the show with the two of you, but I say it in my speeches. I've done 3 Martin Luther King speeches. Shout out to Dana-Farber Cancer Institute that had me as their annual MLK speaker. I want to say this. If you were on on the call today or on the radio today and you are Irish, if you are Italian, if you are Polish, Jewish, I need you to realize that folks that were here before you said the same thing about you. They said that you were bringing crime, drugs, disease, that you didn't have the values of this country, and they tried to keep you out. Maybe they segregated. Irish need not apply. We tend to forget that. I don't know what it is about this country that we have such amnesia, but we tend to also turn around and then do the same thing to those other folks that are coming to this country and feel that they're a threat to us. I don't think the numbers don't bear that out. They're farm workers, they're agricultural workers. They may be serving in a restaurant that you eat at. They may be providing support and building our facilities. They own businesses, they're paying taxes. It is disturbing that we're in this place. And I know some people voted for Donald Trump because they wanted them out, but I want to remind you, they wanted you out too.
Talking to Michael Curry.
Michael Curry, it's clear that the president is on a jihad involving diversity, equity, inclusion. And we talked earlier in the show with our listeners about our surprise that some very powerful places like Harvard University seem to be backing down. Now Northeastern is changing the name is diversity, equity, inclusion. They're changing it to something else. We welcome
Belonging
students or something like that. I mean, and private companies, same thing. What do you make of this?
You know, my theme in my speech this week was, and it's a Dr. King quote again. It says, "Finite disappointments, but infinite hope." And he was encouraging us. We know that we're going to have losses, right? If we talk about American history, on the heels of slavery, 1865, we were celebrating that 4 million people got their freedom, and Reconstruction promised all these opportunities. And after Lincoln's assassination, the succession of presidents reneged on all those promises. We should know through the course of history, we've always we've taken 20 steps forward and then 10 steps back. There's always been a pushback on progress. I would say white supremacy, which people talk about all the time, but I think if you open your eyes, you can see it front and center now. When the president makes the comment that some people, that a plane crash was the result of DEI, when people are starting to shame and blame diversity for the failures of this country, as if bringing more black, brown, other abled people into our workforce is a bad thing. We now know that companies who never wanted to do it in the first place are going to retrench or withdraw quickly, right? Because they'll retreat because it gives them the cover to retreat. But I think what is most disturbing for me in this moment is that, and this reminds me of a moment in history that I won't even tell you what it is because you'll know what I'm talking about. This moment in history where you can't even say the words equity. You have to take it off your website. You can't talk about health equity. You can't talk about racial justice or anti-racism or allyship, because if you do, you won't get funded. You won't get reauthorized. You won't get the services, the support you need. Think about where we are, that words matter. And now we're being told don't use words because that is the ultimate objective behind these executive orders and this anti-DEI effort.
Talking to Michael Curry. Michael, we have an interesting text earlier in the show. I recently found out, my anonymous texter, my longtime doctor is leaving MGHBWH system for concierge practice. Is anyone addressing the primary care desert in Massachusetts for those of us who can't afford the $5,000 concierge membership fee? Can you do two things for it? This is a rare good news story, sort of. Tell us about the primary care crisis that currently exists. But since we criticize the legislature all the time, tell us about something good the legislature did, with your help, by the way, recently, that hopefully will increase to some degree the supply of primary care docs.
Yeah, so we know in Massachusetts, we underinvest in primary care. Just think about sort of how our healthcare system works, right? We know that the smartest thing to do, the most cost-efficient thing to do, the most humane thing to do is to make sure that you have a primary care provider so that you can go see your doctor on a regular basis. You can get wellness visits. You can check on that pain in your side that might be cancer at stage 1 before it's stage 4. You can manage your diabetes or prevent diabetes when you're pre-diabetic. But in order to manage that, and we're talking about all of the needs of your care, we know that if we can get you into primary care, we can stave off the cost of you being in the emergency room or being inpatient in the hospital or having these high-cost medical treatments for diseases that could have been diagnosed and treated at an earlier stage. Unfortunately, in the Commonwealth and across the country, very few of the dollars we spend in healthcare is on primary care. It's really in the other parts of the system, specialty care, hospital, emergency care services, and other parts of the system that tend to be more costly and are vital parts of the system, but we overweight our resources in the other parts of the system. So credit to where we are right now. A few things that are good. Right now, the governor announced in her State of the Commonwealth that primary care is a primary focus for her administration going into this next 2-year session. So credit to Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll. And I've talked to them about this and celebrated their advocacy in this space. The Senate president in the Senate is squarely focused on primary care. And I just a shout out to Cindy Friedman, who is a staunch advocate for all things right when it comes to healthcare, and members of the House that are also talking about primary care as a focus for this administration. And then to your question, Jim, the state legislature just passed a Physician Pathway Act because we know people come here trained in other countries, ready to serve, and they come here and have to take jobs as lab techs and other things when they could be the physician that we need to fill in the gaps. Right now, no matter who you are, arguably no matter what your resources, you're waiting months to be seen for a visit. Health centers have long waits, hospitals have long waits, private practices have long waits. That's unacceptable for you to have to wait three months, 6 months, 9 months to see a doctor or to get a screening or a lab service. That's unacceptable. And I think part of the thing we're celebrating is this Physician Pathway Act, which will now be implemented over the next year, will lead to some great work. Last but not least, David Seltz, Health Policy Commission shout out to them. They have a task force that they're pulling together focused on primary care. I just finished texting with David, congratulating him, or emailing him, congratulating him on this task force. And he lets me know that they are anxious to get to work and come up with some bold proposals to address primary care access in Massachusetts.
One last thing on this Pathways Act, just so I understand it. So heretofore, until this thing was signed, you're an accredited doctor in your home country. You come here, and as you say, you got to become a lab tech, and you got to wait forever, and so and you have the skills and whatever. So what happens under this law? That same doctor who's accredited and skillful back in his or her own country comes here. What's the pathway to getting them actually be doing the same thing and practicing here and increasing the supply of primary doctors?
Yeah, the way the process works with all laws, of course, is, once they're a law and there's, some detail in the legislation, is that now regulatory agencies have to promulgate their law or the regulations. So they're working right now to come up with the language around what's required.
But this will speed up the process. Is that the bottom line? It'll speed up the process?
This will speed up the process. And then they're required to serve in certain communities for 2 years. So that even makes them available where we need them most.
That's great. That's really great.
I have a general question, and I figure you know a lot more than I do on this, obviously. But we've been hearing for a long time about the problem about primary care physicians. People can't find them. And one of the reasons people don't want to go into primary care is they don't get paid enough money. So, so I wonder, people in healthcare tend to be pretty smart people. Why can't we just pay them more money? Is it because the margins are so slim, or what? It just kind of seems crazy.
I might be oversimplifying this, Marjorie, but I'd say, why don't we pay teachers more? It seems like in society, all the most critical jobs in our society, we pay them the least.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a churn, as we say, there's a turnover. So people do it for a few years and they move on or they make other choices. It is idiotic, quite frankly, and that's directed at us as a society. Idiotic that we don't compensate, that we don't incent. Like there's a Medicaid GME program that we left 2008 here in Massachusetts that would get federal dollars matched with state dollars to train primary care, to train physicians in Massachusetts so that we can grow them here and keep them. But we walked away from that program in 2008 with the downturn in the economy, but yet we haven't gone back to it. So we haven't figured out that if you want primary care in Massachusetts, you got to, grow them, right, and send them, and then they got to be diverse, Marjorie.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, and I got to stress this. You've heard me say it before, and I'm gonna say it again. Right, there's brilliant little black girls in Roxbury right now that are meant to be a physician, and they need the social support. They need to be in the STEM program. They need the teacher, the guidance counselor that believes in them. They're there, and they're waiting for us to invite them in to this profession. So I'm hoping that the work that David Seltz is doing, the Health Policy Commission, will lead to those kind of solutions.
Yeah, what's the percentage? You've told us before. Is it 5% of physicians in the United States of America are black?
Just over 5% of the physicians in this country are African American, which is disgusting and disappointing.
By the way, you think you're big in Massachusetts. Kelly E. is listening in Austin, Texas, and says, "Oh my God. I love, love, love." 3 loves, capital letters, my friend. Michael Curry with 3 exclamation marks.
And
a heart.
And a big heart. But I have to tell you, Kelly, I think he's taken. That's my understanding.
Well,
taken.
you'll appreciate, I just spent the morning looking at wedding locations.
There you go. Too late, Kelly.
Hey, Michael, Nicole, our colleague, is monitoring the White House press conference that I think maybe just concluded or whatever. One of the things that Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, said is Trump plans to celebrate Black History Month in the White House with a proclamation despite a memo sent to the Defense Intelligence Agency informing them that they are not to hold celebrations. Do you want to try to make sense of that?
It's the big contradiction that is Donald Trump, right? So it's the little 3-card money or whatever they call it, right? You distract people with one thing and then you do something else. Everything they're doing is trying to discourage celebrating diversity. I know a comment was made by the administration that we don't celebrate Black history, we just celebrate history. The whole purpose of celebrating Black history is because we haven't recognized and fully incorporated Black contributions, Black struggle, Black experience into American history. And again, I'm a beat a dead drum when I say this. In my speeches last week, I say to people, name me 5 Black heroes and sheroes from slavery, 1619, 1865, Juneteenth, Galveston. If you can't name me 5 people who violently or non-violently live free or die, give me liberty or give me death, fought to free themselves, then what kind of history did you get? What did they teach you? That they literally left out generations of people who were enslaved, fought, died, advocated, petitioned for their freedom, but yet you don't know that history. We left out that history for a reason. When you write people out of history, you write out their experience, and then you can't explain why they're disparately poor, disparately unhoused, disparately sick, unbanked, poor, not C-suites, all of that. So I think the importance here is the Trump administration will do some sort of a ceremonial thing, but they're wiping out our history everywhere else. They're banning books. They support banning books.
Yeah.
That's disturbing.
You know, can I ask you, it just occurred to me as we're speaking, the NAACP, and you sit on the national board, as we mentioned, is a nonpartisan organization. Do you reach out to Donald Trump as an organization and say, we'd like to sit down with you and talk to you about our concerns and hear yours?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Rosalind Brock, the former chair of the NAACP, and when she first invited me to come on the board in 2014, I got elected, a national election, and she said at a meeting one time, she said, there's no permanent friends and no permanent enemies, just permanent interests. So the reality is we'll work with anybody to get stuff done. If we can get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act done with, MAGA Republicans, we'll do it. If we can get the John Lewis's Voting Rights Act bill, we'll do it, right? We'll meet with, and Derek Johnson is meeting with folks on that side as well to make sure that we can get these things done. Now, whether it'll get done or not is a whole nother question, but we have a responsibility, an obligation to meet with anyone and everyone to advance civil rights, social justice in this country, and that work is underway.
Michael, thank you very much, and
Great to see you,
congratulations
Michael
on looking for the wedding locations. Kelly's heart is broken.
You both will get an invite. So
Oh, good. I'm ready.
Hope so.
I'm ready.
We're there.
Michael is the CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers and a board member of the National NAACP. He's also co-chair of a city-led investigation into the impacts of Carney Hospital's closure in Dorchester, Massachusetts. I just want to point out that Carolyn Levitt, in her latest press conference, I talked about how she was wearing a big cross around her neck at the first press conference. Cross wasn't there today, so I don't know what that means. The cross has become like the American flag. It's a symbol of something that it really isn't associated with. A lot of people feel like the American flag on a truck now is a MAGA thing, and the cross has become like a MAGA thing. Anyway, also from the press conference, they talked about the Lake and Riley Act will require detention of unauthorized immigrants accused, not convicted, of theft and violent crimes to be detained at Guantanamo Bay. I mean, boy.
By the way, let's clarify that. It says what's factually accurate. Accused. Not necessarily indicted. Surely don't have to be convicted. And even if it's dismissed, you can still, your detention is required under the Lake and Riley law. And it's not just violent crimes and theft. It's really minor crimes,
but
including shoplifting.
But I didn't know it was Guantanamo Bay.
Well, he just announced that 2 days ago. There are 30,000 beds. It's a tough guy thing, like Tom Homan. Former Governor Sununu, tough guy on CNN, laughing, ridiculing other people's comments.
But again, I guess I don't understand how you can do these things. Due process, no court procedure. You're just accused.
There's a provision in the Constitution.
The guy next door, I think he came from another country illegally, and I think he tried to rob my car.
Does it say in the 14th Amendment that if you're born in this country, you're a citizen?
It does.
He just said he banned birthright citizenship. He doesn't give a damn about the Constitution.
Well,
unfortunately, the people who support him don't give a damn about the fact that he doesn't give a damn about the Constitution.
The reason I mention this, though, is that I hope that a lot of these things are things he cannot actually do.
I hope.
He's just trying to scare everybody.
A lot of lawyering.
Anyway, on a much more important topic, frozen peas. Frozen corn, frozen carrots. We're celebrating the often overlooked frozen foods that are in your refrigerator in the freezer section, of course. A new piece out in the New York Times claims that frozen foods are healthier, cheaper, better than their non-thawed alternatives. I don't know, Jim. I'm very close to my roasted vegetable recipes, but we're going to talk about it up next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, members of the state's congressional delegation are highlighting how the Trump administration's rescinded funding freeze and other policies are affecting Massachusetts. And this week's Joy Beat takes us to where beauty meets impact, a salon empowering people of color to feel confident and training them for success. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Flower, Joanne Chang's bakery with 9 locations in Boston and Cambridge, delivering Valentine's Day sweets like a cake for 2 or sweetheart cookies. Orders accepted through February 9th. flowerbakery.com/valentines-day. And Subaru of New England. This winter, you can explore New England in the all-wheel drive 2025 Subaru Outback. You can find your Subaru retailer at subaruofnewengland.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marge Regan, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We had to give you a Trump-free final 25 minutes today, and we're going to do it. No Trump talk, no Trump text, no Trump calls, frozen vegetables.
How does he feel about frozen vegetables? You know how the president feels about frozen vegetables?
If you can get a frozen taco, he's okay. What was he eating on the plane that day? Was in his office?
He eats a lot of cheeseburgers.
What's that place called? What's the cheap taco joint called?
Taco Bell?
Taco Bell. He was eating the Taco Bell thing. In any case, actually, I sort of like Taco Bell too. But in any case, a new piece out in the New York Times celebrates the often overlooked frozen food. The bag of peas and blueberries growing, that fuzzy frost crystal in the back of our freezer as we speak. Frozen foods are cheaper. I think we know that. They obviously last longer. And here's the point that most of you don't know. They can also be healthier than fresh foods that you store in your fridge. I repeat, healthier. The Times story highlights a 2015 study that found, for example, frozen corn, green beans, and blueberries had, quote, significantly higher levels of vitamin C than their fresh counterparts. That's not the only example, by the way. And if you ever tried frozen peas, you know that frozen food can also taste better too, especially if this is one of my favorite things. Just pop them in your mouth straight from the freezer like a wild person. You ever do that? Just take them out, pop them in frozen?
No, I've not done
they
that, Jim.
explode in your mouth. In any case.
I haven't eaten frozen cakes either, like you have.
We'll mention that too. Call or text at 877-301-8970. Are we as a society giving enough love to frozen foods? What frozen alternatives do you swear by? Or are you a fresh or die kind of person? And since Marjorie mentioned, I was going to mention it later, it is true that when I was in college, I said this 2 days ago on the air, I would buy a frozen Sara Lee cake. I was too hungry to wait, and I would eat it frozen, which, by the way, is not easy, but I was able to do it at 877. Everybody's done that. Come on.
No,
877.
Everybody
oh,
hasn't
yes,
done that, Jim.
How many have eaten a frozen Sara Lee cake without defrosting it?
Oh, there
exactly.
you go.
I can look at you. I mean, of course you have.
Okay.
Why wouldn't you, right?
Okay.
Exactly. 877-301-8970. And by the way, there's a wonderful piece we're going to quote from, another Times piece, that talks about all of the rules that you should know about what you can freeze, what you can't freeze. And one piece of advice that I live by,
What's that, Jim? What
which
do you
is
live by?
Cook double, freeze half.
Oh yeah, that's brilliant.
What do you mean it's brilliant?
I know. I think it's occurred to lots of people.
Well, maybe it has, maybe it hasn't.
That's why a lot of recipes say you can freeze this at the bottom. That's
Exactly.
always the go-to
Cook
kind of
double,
thing.
freeze half.
But I tell you what, I am very fond of frozen peas. I have oodles of frozen
You
peas.
do? I didn't know
because,
that.
Well, if you have mashed potatoes or baked potatoes,
Do you
which I love,
defrost them?
Of course you
Why?
defrost them because
Why?
they taste better. You put them in water,
No, they
you
don't.
put it in the microwave oven, you can
I know how to
little
cook 'em.
package, and then you smash them into the baked potato or the mashed potatoes with a little bit of
You know how to
butter
live.
on there. I really do. But now I know I can do everything else. This story says you don't have to, and they're better for it. They say frozen corn, green beans, and blueberries have more levels of vitamin C than their fresh counter spot.
Someone I know just
counterparts.
said that. That's incorrect.
Well, I'm repeating.
Okay.
And did you talk about vitamin E?
No, I didn't. Go
well,
ahead.
Frozen green beans,
Yeah.
peas, blueberries, and spinach.
Spinach.
Higher than their fresh versions. And spinach can be, kind of a pain in the neck, though, when it's frozen. It's all stuck together. But I guess you have to run. And some of these you don't even have to put underwater. Frozen.
You know what you do, by the way? You just
What?
lick it. If you lick it, it defrosts more quickly. And then, exactly, they do that too. This is my kind of audience. You lick it,
Now,
and then you eat it.
I am a big fan. I'm not much of a cook, but
No,
I
you're
do.
not much of a cook.
I do excel at the roasted vegetable
You
front.
do,
I don't know
that's
what
what I
this
hear.
is going to do to my roasted vegetable franchise, because this person says what you can do is you can get frozen broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and beans for stir fry. You just throw them right into a sheet pan or into the wok, and you just don't even have to get the water out. I don't know. I'm suspicious.
Here's another good one. Anonymous says, yuck. Frozen vegetables are only good to be used as an ice pack. I would say frozen vegetables are also good to be used
They're very
as an
good.
ice pack.
They're very good to be used
Okay,
as an
so
ice
they're
pack.
healthier in not all circumstances, but in many. They are clearly easier, and they are clearly cheaper. And I believe this is true. I'm going to say this, Jamie, and can you check to see if I'm making it up? I think there's less sodium. Like if you buy a can of soggy peas, which is inedible, there's a ton of sodium. I think there's less sodium. And by the way, you know what's a good example is Roger Berkowitz, who knows a lot more about this than we do.
Yes.
Roger was here the other day and
With
brought
the
in
fish
stuff.
chowder
Roger Fishco, you had it.
and
It's
the
fabulous and unbelievable. But he talked about this nitrogen freezing, where they freeze like a salmon when they catch it out at sea and bring it in. And it ends up being fresher than fresh because it is fresh frozen with nitrogen, whatever that means, as soon as it's taken out of the water. What do you think of that,
apparently,
Marjorie?
I think that's a brilliant.
Not much,
I think that's a
obviously.
brilliant
Okay, fine.
idea. I think
Thank
it's a
you.
brilliant idea. I
Okay,
think
fine.
a lot of our listeners, though, seem to be using their frozen vegetables, Jim, for ice packs.
I said that.
Donna on the road says, I always keep a bag of frozen peas in my freezer. Great treatment for puffy eyes or a headache. And Meredith from Brookline, she just bought a whole bunch of frozen peas and carrots. They're great to have if you need, again, an ice pack due to injury.
You've never done that?
Yes, but we're talking about eating them, not just using
Well,
them as
I use
ice
them as an
packs.
ice pack and then I eat them. So here is this is according to Google AI, which never lies. Thank you, Jamie. Frozen vegetables generally have less sodium than canned vegetables. Should I read the next sentence? I don't believe this. However, the sodium content of both frozen and canned, obviously can vary depending on the type of vegetables, whatever. 877-301-89. This is one of these frozen vegetables and you kind of thing. And again, cheaper, easier, and in many cases, more nutritious than the fresh
And
stuff.
then you don't have to have the terrible flashbacks like Jen from Wellesley suffering from the brownish canned green beans of her childhood.
Here's Joel in Connecticut. Frozen Twinkies are love. You ever had a frozen Twinkie?
I will not eat. They ruin Twinkies. They used to have the real cream filling on
it's
the
not, it's
inside.
like
Now
fake.
it's like a sugar thing.
How about a frozen Milky Way around Halloween?
Yeah, I don't know. I like them when they're not frozen, Jim. I
Okay.
don't know. They
Fine.
taste better, I think.
All right.
Taylor from Weymouth, what do you think?
Hello, Taylor.
Hey, Jim. Hey, Marjorie.
Hi.
Hi.
So I used to be an adult ESL teacher many years ago, and we had some people from like the SNAP program come in to help give our adult ESL learners nutrition advice, especially for getting their children the nutrition that they need. And one of the things that stuck in my mind, we would talk about which is better, to eat fresh vegetables or frozen vegetables. And the people from the program, they always said the best kind of vegetable for your child to eat is the one that they actually eat.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if they're fresh or frozen, as long as you can get
That's
them
a good
their
one.
vegetables, that's what counts. Get them their nutrition. So I think there's kind of a stigma towards frozen vegetables. Personally, I love them. I think they're fine. And yeah, as long as I'm eating vegetables, it's good, I guess.
Taylor, that's good. That was a really good one. Nice start. Thank
I think
you for
kids
the
like
call.
peas.
They do?
I think so.
Well, because you can flip peas.
Yeah, broccoli,
Flip
Brussels
peas to your
sprouts.
sibling.
Those are a little bit.
I didn't
those
have a
are
sibling, so it was hard to flip them out.
So you just kind of flip it
I
yourself?
flip them myself, yeah. I did. Or against the wall. I'd sit close to the wall, flip them, and they'd bounce back at me. Now, listen to this. Speaking of food, I know it's
Yeah.
not today's topic, but you were not here for this. Well, maybe you were here for this. A week or so ago, we did how to peel the hard-boiled egg.
Oh, yes, Sally
Well,
and Rosendale.
Whoa. Yesterday or the day before, I'm not sure if you were back yet, I said that I got a Bon Appetit email saying an alternative thing where you boil the water first and then place the eggs in. And Sally from Rosendale, why don't you read it, Marjorie?
Sally says, I just hard-boiled 2 eggs for the first time, boiled the water first, and the shells came off like a dream.
Yeah, you're welcome, Sally. Thank you.
Your problems are solved, Jim.
877-301-8870. We're talking about frozen foods, your attachment to them, your revulsion by them. Don't they say in this headline, it's a pretty good headline in The Guardian, freeze your nuts is what it says, but not, that's what it says, but not your mushrooms. 28 thrifty, fabulous ways to use your freezer. And by the way, one of the things that is really important, this is huge. Make sure if you don't have one of those expensive machines that gets all the air out, I can't remember what it's called, you got to squeeze all the air out of the a thing that you're putting it in, like a plastic bag, or it's going to get freezer burn and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
Do you know that?
I didn't know that.
Well, you know it now. What are you
and
talking
now
about?
I know that in the freeze your nuts story that says walnuts, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, almonds, pecans, pine nuts.
They're nuts.
You should freeze them all.
That's why
I put walnuts in the refrigerator because I use a lot of walnuts, but I didn't know you're supposed
I would start freezing them if I were you.
I'm going to start freezing them, Jim.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to Patrick. Oh, Patrice in New Hampshire.
Hey,
Hi.
Patrice, what's up?
Hi. Yes, I am calling because my story about peas is when my children were very small.
Yeah.
Somehow I convinced them that they could have peas as a treat, frozen peas.
Wow.
And they'd come to me at dinner and at dinner time when I was making dinner, and say, "Mommy, can we please have a cup of peas?"
That is great.
Yeah, I'd pour out a cup of peas, and they'd eat. They'd go off like they had M&Ms and not bother me. And my friends were always like, "How did you do that?" And to the life of me, I can't remember how I convinced them, but my daughter's in 28 and my son's 30, and they both laugh about it now.
Well, I want you to know, I may be your child, Patrice, even though I'm not 100% sure. No, I'm telling you, when I was a little kid, with no urging from my mother, that's where I got my first attachment to frozen peas, eating them, as I say, while frozen. So I'm totally with them, and good for you. You're an excellent mother. Thank you very much for the call. 87. What's that? Well, thank you for the call. We appreciate it.
Okay, a lot of people are not down with the frozen vegetables, Jim.
What were they saying?
This person says they had a dietitian tell them fresh vegetables that came from California had something blown into the bag to keep them fresh on their way to the East Coast, and should only eat frozen vegetables if you were looking for no chemicals. I mean, that's a good reason, too.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they talk about them being picked when they're really ripe, and you have to wait a while for other vegetables to
You know what's also key? Labeling. Are you good at frozen labeling?
No, I'm not, Jim.
Well, it's a very simple thing.
I have trouble trying to close my freezer every day.
I know what you
I have to
mean.
rearrange everything all the time.
But think of it, how great is it? You write what's in it, because often you can't tell because it's frozen.
Yeah.
You write the date on it that you froze it, and then you Google what you don't make faces.
Do you do that?
Yes, and you Google as to
okay.
whether or not, let's say it was 10/24, October 24, not 2020. You Google about whether or not that item is still good. What are you laughing about? 3 months later.
It just, I just think of you puttering around your kitchen, Jim. You come to work with seven little Tupperware containers
I do.
with little bits of food
And
in
your
each
problem
one.
is what? What is
and
the
you're
point?
running around labeling. Do you label them with masking tape or with Scotch tape?
I have a special tape. Actually, it doesn't come off. A certain tape, it does come off in the freezer.
Okay.
So I use a certain kind of tape. And by the way, I'd tell you, if you weren't ridiculing me, I'd tell you what the tape was, but I will not.
It's okay, but I figure in your house, I mean, there are other rooms, obviously, the living room, bedroom, den, whatever, bedrooms.
No den, yeah.
But I would imagine, what percentage of your time do you think is spent in the kitchen of your home?
Well, unfortunately, and this just didn't work out, my bed is not in the kitchen. There was a big debate in my house about whether I could move it there. So of my waking hours, I would say no more than like 93%.
That's what I figured.
93%.
Darren from Cambridge, thank you for calling.
Serious, by the way. Hey.
Thank you.
Hi.
Glad to be on.
You
Thank
too.
you for calling.
I have got with a buddy a Boston-based comedy podcast about frozen food.
You do not.
Yeah, absolutely. It's called The Froze Bros. TheFrozeBros.com.
Okay.
We do share some real information. Get some. We just did some trends and predictions for the year ahead in frozen food. We try something in each podcast. What we've also done is sort of gimmicky segments. Some of the stuff you talked about, like freezing Twinkies or Ho-Hos or nuts or chips, making popsicles out of various different things, and then just seeing how it turns out frozen.
Now, Darren,
by the way,
Darren.
wait. Jamie says you have 10 subscribers. I want you to know you're going to have 11 as soon as the show is over. Give us some of the tips.
Yeah, well, I also want to know why you chose. I mean, there are a lot of things to do podcasts about.
I would do it if I had time.
The freezing things wouldn't be the top of my list, but how did you come to this, Darren?
Good question.
Was it a trauma from your childhood, or
what is it?
What's the deal?
No. Honestly, we just sort of brainstormed ideas, and didn't find any other one about frozen food.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
So wait a second. I can't go on the podcast until 2:00. So give us a few tips that you shared with your subscribers, which are, let's call them, unique. Most of us would not know. What do you got there, Darren?
Oh, something we've tried out too is different ways of making something, like frozen burritos.
Mm-hmm.
We test out the microwaved directions versus the air fryer versus some hybrid.
That's great.
We like the hybrid version. Start them out in the microwave and then put them into the air fryer a little while. So they get crisp, but they won't get super fried.
That's
and
fabulous.
hard.
Give us one more. That's an excellent
Well, I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Margie.
Well, I didn't know until today that people were supposed to freeze sunflower seeds and almonds and walnuts and pecans.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that we should be freezing that we're not? I freeze a lot of bread,
question.
baked goods. What else you would be freezing, Darren, do you think?
I like the idea of freezing those nuts and seeds also.
Yeah.
We tried that.
Yeah.
We're not sure if we were going to break our teeth when we.
Excellent point. That's a good point.
So they can still be eaten right out of the freezer. They don't have to be defrosted.
So before you go, first of all, I'm jealous that you and your buddy came up with the Froze Bros before I did.
Mike, shout out to Mike.
Shout out Mike. Thank you and congratulations to you. How proud would you say your parents were when you told them that you were one of the Froze Bros? What was their immediate reaction?
My parents are gone, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm
but
sorry.
I've made the joke on the podcast that my mother was the only Italian woman who couldn't cook.
Oh, Darren. There you go.
How about Mike's parents?
Has sort of thrown his mom under the bus, too, and talked about how bad the pumpkin pie was that she used to make. In October, we did Pumpkin Spice Ice Month and tried everything we could frozen that was made with pumpkin or pumpkin spice.
Okay, the Froze Bros.
Okay,
Darren and
we're
Mike,
doing
we're going to check it out. Thank you, Darren. We really appreciate your call. Good luck with the podcast or whatever you got there.
Oh, here's a good helpful tip. Frozen vegetables also eliminate lots of food waste because they're not going to go bad if you have them in the freezer. And somebody else said that they gave up eating nightly bowls of ice cream because their cholesterol was getting high. They didn't want to worry about weight and stuff. So now they have a nightly bowl of frozen mango chunks. Melt in your mouth. Hardly any calories. What do you think of that, Jen?
Well, first of all, I hope I'm wrong about this, but I was into mangoes last year. We had a guest on. Didn't we have a Mango Man? Whoever. He was great. That's what he called himself. And I started eating mangoes. But I thought I looked it up after I was consuming huge amounts of cut mangoes from either Whole Foods or Market Basket. I think there are more calories than in your average fruit.
You think so?
It's fair. Can we check that out? Because I don't want to give
But you know what?
horrible advice here.
Those are great frozen.
They are?
Yeah.
Because they melt in your mouth. They actually
and
do.
also they're great in smoothies.
Yeah.
Let's go to Max from Philadelphia, your hometown, Jim.
Hey, Max.
Hey, Jim and Marjorie.
Yeah.
My grandmother's going to freak out when she hears me on here. I just wanted to share with Marjorie, because I know she's from Fall River.
Yes.
I just moved here to Philadelphia from that area.
Oh.
My parents came to visit a few months ago, and they brought me frozen Sam's Bakery meat pies.
Oh my goodness.
Is that Fall River?
Yeah, those are famous, right?
Yes, loved it.
What's so great about them?
Honestly, the nostalgia factor.
Yeah, nostalgia factor.
True.
There's a lot of great food in my hometown. A lot of great food.
Hey,
a lot of great
Max,
Portuguese food.
Sorry, go ahead, Max. I'm sorry.
No, it's the meat pies, the open face, the Manish. Sam's Bakery is probably top 3 for me.
Let me ask you before you go, how many, approximately, I know you don't know exactly, how many times a week would you say you listen to the Froze Bros podcast, would you say? On average, a typical week?
On average, I'm a weekly listener.
Okay. Well, I think Mike and whoever he was, or Darren, are probably quite happy. Check it out. It sounds great to me. Thank you very much. By the way, mangoes, or mongos, as I just called them, are... Oh, I was wrong. I was wrong. They're
What?
low calorie.
They are?
Both mangoes and apples are known as why did I stop eating them? They're fabulous.
I don't know.
And by the way, they taste really sweet. Do you eat them? You're always losing weight. Do you eat them or don't, Jamie? You do? You do? Okay, fine. All right, well, that's
I'm looking for the Froze Bros podcast on Spotify. Did you find it on Spotify?
No, I didn't find it anywhere.
Oh, okay.
Neither
All right.
anybody else, apparently, because only 10. But let me tell you, hey, Darren, call us back in a week and tell us how much your call to our show increased your subscriber base. I'm just curious as to what kind of impact we have on human beings. Where do you want to go, Marjorie?
Okay, I was looking at the Froze
I'm
Bros.
sorry.
But I'll go to Mindy in Abington. Hi, Mindy.
Hello, Mindy.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
I hate when people say okay.
well,
I didn't mean
how are you
okay.
doing?
I'm fine. I didn't mean okay. Go ahead. I don't like that.
All right. Is
Go
that
ahead.
a bad thing
Whatever.
to say?
I don't like
All
saying
right.
it. Go ahead. Yeah.
I grew up in Queens, New York in the 60s and 70s. And we used to hang out at my friend. You know, she had a finished basement. And her mom put frozen chocolate Sara Lee cakes in the freezer. And she put them in the freezer because she wanted to lose weight, you know, so she wouldn't eat it.
Yeah.
So we would be down there, and we would see the frozen cakes, and we would eat them, and they were great. We ate them frozen, and we loved them, and that's the last time I ever ate them. Frozen was in the 60s.
Well, by the way, my frozen Sara Lee cake experience was not just chocolate cake. That was one of the two, but banana cake. And I think we learned, did we not learn, we said this the other day, Sara Lee still exists, and they still have cakes in frozen things?
I don't know.
But in any case, Mindy, thanks for sharing your story. We appreciate it. By the way, Jamie actually sent a note, which is really nice. Jamie said, Marjorie, if he's busy labeling frozen food, he's not texting
That's
me
right.
or you. Leave him alone.
That's right. Label away, Jim.
That's a very good point.
So they're late. So the January 21st, the Froze Bros, I did find it.
Okay.
Episode 17,
What'd they
Res
say?
Burritos. The dog did it.
Mhm.
And this is their first episode of 2025.
Wow.
The Bros toast to the new year and dig into the biggest trends in frozen foods. The Bropisode dives into a report titled Future of Frozen Food, and they talk about these burritos with a variety of burritos. Frozen burritos, I
Well,
guess.
that's great. We just talked about it. This is a really important call because I should have said this is a huge money-saving thing. Cindy from Quincy, why are you calling?
I'm calling because I was online on a vegetarian website,
Yeah.
and they said you go and you need tarragon or you need rosemary,
Sure.
and you use a few sprigs, and then it goes bad in your fridge.
And it's
So
like
she
$4.
Right, and she chops up a bunch of it and measures teaspoons of each and puts them in silicone ice cube trays, small ones, then pours a little bit of olive oil just till it comes above them and freezes them. And then when your recipe asks for it, you just pop it out into your frying pan. It's got the oil, and you just fry it up.
That's fabulous. By the way, thank you for that. I don't do it as scientifically the olive oil thing, but usually when you buy fresh herbs, which are great, it's like $4, $3.99.
You can freeze those.
You use a little bit, as Cindy said, and you freeze them. You can freeze them with some finesse, like Cindy's friend does, or you just put them in a freezer bag and you save, at least for a few weeks, that stuff. By the way, someone who wrote clear mint cubes? Who wrote that? I've heard about those too. Who is that, Zoe? And this anonymous, who? Somebody. Anonymous texter said, frozen green grapes are fantastic. I assume they explode in your mouth like peas. You know how much fun we're going to have after the show?
Well, I want to listen to the Froze Bros making popsicles from Liquid IV Popsicle Firecracker Hydration Multiplier.
Yeah.
They want to know if it will save them from their hangovers.
When are we having the Froze Bros on the show? Can we get rid of the Jared segment at the end and see if we could do maybe 2 minutes with the bros every couple of days? Because this segment is doing nothing for me.
The Bropisode, that's what they call it.
So thank
Ignore
you for
him, Jared.
unfortunately.
Just ignore him.
I just realized I mouthed something and we're streaming, so maybe I should
That's
have
right.
turned
That's
it
a
around.
problem.
And,
you said something bad to me? Thank you very much.
That's okay.
Do you, we guess. We like guessing every day. This guy clearly is a fresh-only kind of guy because that's sort of how you present yourself to the world. That is true, correct?
I guess so. I guess that's how I present to the
look
world.
how nervous he is.
That's right.
Because
You're
I
like
nailed
a big
it.
piece of broccoli right there. That's what we think of you. We think of you. Maybe
Sprouting,
Brussels sprouts, something like that. big piece of vegetable that's fresh, Jim. That's right.
So you're embarrassed, obviously, by this conversation. I can tell. Yeah, you are embarrassed.
You know
I don't
what
blame
you can't
him.
freeze,
What?
though? We didn't say that.
What?
Mushrooms. Did you say that?
You can't freeze them.
mushrooms.
Well, you know
freeze
who
them.
eats frozen? I eat frozen
Or
peas.
tomatoes.
Aiden told us before the show, and this is really disgusting.
What?
He eats frozen broccoli out of the freezer. Now, that is nauseating. Thank you very much.
How can you even eat? I don't understand how you could even eat that. The only two things I have in my freezer are vodka and Thin Mints.
Exactly.
Good for you.
I rest my damn case.
Good for you.
You are
okay.
incredible.
All right. What are you talking about in the weekend review,
really?
Chad?
So we're gonna. Why is that incredible?
I mean, well, just go ahead. What are you doing on the show?
We're going to be talking about this Smithsonian. We have a lot of Trump intersection with the arts this week, but with his mandates, with the Smithsonian ending its DEI office, the very quiet dissolution of the president's committee on the arts, and the funding that's now being held up. So we'll look at that. We'll also look at the Fire Aid Festival last night, which was fantastic. I don't know if
I
you
read
guys
about
saw
it. I didn't
that.
hear it.
Yeah, tell us
Joni
about
Mitchell
it.
did a song too, right?
Joni
Both Sides
Mitchell,
Now?
Nirvana got together with fill-in singers for obviously Kurt Cobain. It was amazing.
Dead, right?
Well, yeah, it was pretty dead.
Okay.
And then Boston City Hall becoming a landmark. So we have lots of things to talk about this week.
Leslie from Valley
Yeah.
Falls. Go read that.
The Froze Bros have a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast, unlike you and Marjorie.
Thank you very much. You know, can I just say one more thing to you? And I usually don't say this kind of thing on the
wait
air,
a minute.
but
Only
what?
2 people have rated the Froze Bros.
Well, still, that's two. You know,
But the
one of
Froze Bros rated the Froze Bros.
That's right.
While we sort of want your show to succeed, one of the things that really bothers us is when we want a guest and you get them before we do.
It's very
So if we
annoying.
could just say on the air, you do not plan on booking the Froze Bros anytime.
I think they've been booked while you've been on the air. I'm sorry. Sorry, we're on it.
Because I'm telling you, Darren and Mike, they're going to be hot. And we're going to be like the producers of their damn show, Margaret. Oh, did you tell us what you're doing? I can't remember.
Yeah,
Yes, he did. He just did.
Smithsonian.
Oh, you did do
Yeah,
that. Sorry.
and the fire
Aid.
concert.
I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Nirvana. We'll just do it
right.
all over
Okay,
and over
fine.
again.
Okay,
and
thank
Boston
you.
City Hall is now a landmark.
Oh, I know that. I mean, good. Okay, fine.
Even more from 30 seconds ago.
Okay. We're going to
Okay.
Sorry, I
We're
wasn't
done.
paying attention. Good
don't-
luck with the
yeah.
show. Right here, by the way.
It's right here.
In 2 or 3
That's
minutes,
right.
so do not
That's
go
right. As soon
anywhere.
as we get our stuff off the desks
Exactly.
here, Jim. Thank you very much for listening to another edition
By the way,
of
they were
Boston
right.
Public-
Both bros rated their own podcast. That's how they got 2 5 stars.
Thank you very much to people that came down
That's
to the
an
Boston Public
excellent point.
Library. You can keep up with us 24/7. We have our own podcast. It's not
Contact them.
It's not like the Froze Bros, but we do the best we can. Check us out, our TikTok page as well at Boston Public Radio. On Monday, we're going to be joined by the Ground Truth Project's Charlie Sennett, Princeton's Khalil Gibran Mohammed, Food Policy Analyst Corby Cummer. I can't wait to talk to Khalil about what this means for his
Me too.
courses, because he teaches about African American history. He did at Harvard. Well, he still does at Harvard, but he also does at Princeton. Folks from BMC's Reconnect program, a wellness group addressing the mental health impacts of racism. Our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Additional support from Tamsin Vital. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jane Bologna. Special thanks to our BPL staff, Maddie Geyer, Patrick Lally, Colin Cockrell, Juan Jose Cadena. Our host, the Newsfeed Cafe, delicious lunch chain across the street at the Lenox Hotel. Stay tuned right after us, No News, for the Culture Show Week in Review, which starts immediately as soon as we clear off our desks here at 89.7 GBH.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Attendees of this year's annual meeting can connect with leaders of STEM, February 13th through 15th at Heinz Convention Center. Registration at AAAS.org/meetings. Salt, fat, acid, heat, action. GBH has all the sizzling shows with all the seasonings. Catch your favorite cooking shows starting tomorrow at 11 and continuing all afternoon on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show. Coming up today on our Arts and Culture Week in Review, the Smithsonian. It's closing its DEI office and freezing federal hiring following President Trump's mandate. Even though it's not a federal agency, it gets a big chunk of funding from federal appropriations. So what will this mean for its many museums and the Panda Cam? Plus, while representation might...
The Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Welcome to The Culture Show, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm Jared Bowen. I'm joined by co-host Edgar B. Horwick III and Culture Show contributor Lisa Simmons. She's the artistic and executive director of the Roxbury International Film Festival and program manager at Mass Cultural Council. It's time for our Arts and Culture Week in Review. Here's what it sounded like.
This is the memo. It went out to the heads of every federal department and agency, giving them until 5 p.m. today to notify all federal employees who work on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that they are being placed on paid leave effective immediately, and that all those programs across the federal government will soon be shut down.
Before becoming the birthplace of jazz, New Orleans in the late 1700s was a city of opera. Their next big performance, Edmond Deday's Morgiane, believed to be the first full opera composed by a Black American.
Moving the Mona Lisa, the iconic painting from Leonardo da Vinci, is getting a new and dedicated room inside the Louvre as the Parisian institution begins a 10-year gut reno.
A group of Mexicans responded to Emilia Perez by creating a short film titled Johann Sacre-Bleu. Yeah, so it's a French film.
I love our people.
Hello, LA, and everybody watching around the world watching us. Welcome to Fire Aid. We are gathered here at the Kia Forum, which is Steve Ballmer's guest house. And later we'll be over at the fantastic Intuit Dome. Our goal is simple tonight, to raise more money than the Dodgers spent on free agents.
Well, as you just heard, the Smithsonian is closing its Office of Diversity and freezing federal hiring following a President Trump mandate. How will this affect its myriad museums and cultural institutions? From there, it's an operatic phantom. For 138 years, the first completed opera by a Black American composer was hidden away. Now it finally has its debut. Mona Lisa is a woman on the move amid upcoming renovations at the Louvre. She's getting a room of her own. Plus, talk about banding together. Musicians unite for Fire Aid, a benefit concert raising funds for wildfire recovery and prevention. And it's Follow-Up Friday, where we catch up on some of the stories we've been tracking, including Goop goddess Gwyneth Paltrow plowing into off-Broadway as a musical spoofs her notorious ski trial. But first, the Smithsonian is closing its DEI office in the wake of President Trump declaring diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to be, quote, illegal and immoral discrimination programs. The Smithsonian is also instituting a hiring freeze on federal employees as uncertainty about federal funding swirls around the Smithsonian and other cultural organizations and education programs across the country. So we have been wondering how Trump executive orders would filter into the arts sector in this country, and now we're beginning to get a sense of how that's playing out. Lonnie Bunch, who is the director of the Smithsonian Museums, has said that this will not interrupt any accessibility to the museum, that these issues are paramount, but per federal mandate, they had to close down the DEI office. There are a couple of other things we'll talk about that it came out with executive orders this week, but let's start talking about this and how this begins to interrupt the arts and culture sector.
It completely interrupts the arts and culture sector. I think it really what it is it creates noise, right? So and it creates a misunderstanding or not an understanding, so that people are scrambling to figure out what are they going to do, how do they do this. You know, the funny thing is the Smithsonian is not a federal agency, as we all know, but they do get billions of dollars in federal funding, which a lot of these museums do. A lot of museums here in Massachusetts get a lot of federal funding. So people are obviously committed to this equity and inclusion and diversity. Obviously, we all know that what's important is getting people in the door. Once they feel comfortable, they come back. But you need to do things. There are measures you need to take to open up your doors to everyone. You know, I find it really interesting that Lonnie Bunch is in the middle of this, as he was the executive director of the African American Museum at the Smithsonian for many years, and then moved over to this position as the first African American to hold this role for all of Smithsonian museum. So, I mean, I think that what a lot of people are going to do is they're going to figure out a way to get around that language. Like he says, we're still going to do accessibility and we're still going to do belonging, and then we're just going to have a more a wider view of what that means. Take out the diversity and the equity part of it, but continue to do the work that they're doing to allow people into these museums.
And when we say museums, let's remember, I mean, you say the Smithsonian, I think a lot of times maybe people are picturing kind of one museum, but this is 21 museums. This is also research centers and education centers. And Jared, to your point, something that you talk about on this show all the time, they're free.
Yep.
They are free to all people who come in. That's kind of part of how this works. One thing that I keep thinking about and try to remind myself about around this story and some of the other stuff we're going to talk about, the premise here around, there's the DEI sort of question, but then there's this whole other thing going on with a lot of these executive orders that is about the way we're spending taxpayer dollars and what they should go to and what they shouldn't go to. And I think one of the things in these conversations is these numbers are so large that I don't think we have our heads around what we're talking about when we're talking about these numbers and the difference between them. So something I tell myself again and again is the difference between a million and a billion.
Yes.
Right? So if we took that and made that into time, 1 million seconds is about 11 days and 14 hours. That's 1 million seconds. 1 billion seconds is 31.5 years. So the difference between 1 million and 1 billion is enormous. When you get to 1 trillion, right, now you're talking 31,000 plus years. So as we look at these stories, as we think about this, as we read about people talking about we're trying to get right with federal dollars, et cetera, I urge people to keep these things in mind. Don't just go like, oh my gosh, all of these numbers are so big. Like, look at the difference between 1 million and 1 billion and 1 trillion when they're saying we're going to save money by doing this or that or the other thing.
And probably the person on this panel who can speak the best to the disparity in numbers, too, is Lisa Simmons, from your roles in the arts and the Roxbury International Film Festival, Mass Cultural Council, and others, and looking at... I keep being mindful of how entwined the money is here. So now there is a freeze on freezing the federal funding and grants.
Freeze on the freeze.
Freeze on the freeze, but it does seem entwined. So if people are not responding and following the mandates, which until there's a court order they have to do, this is why the Smithsonian and others have shut down their DEI offices. But they're also concerned about the funding. Again, it's been, presumably it's back in play, but this is funding, if you start to look at the NEA, or the NEH, the funding that comes to those institutions and comes right here to Massachusetts, where we saw about $12 million come between last year and this year. To go back to your point, Edgar, $25,000 may not seem like a lot to the Smithsonian, but it's a real lot of money to a fringe theater group, for instance,
Absolutely.
or a museum just trying to get off its
Exactly.
feet.
I mean, I think that's the point, right? I mean, we're talking about research centers, we're talking about libraries, we're talking about these are the people that are going to be affected, and the free, people getting into the Smithsonian for free. I mean, they've been doing that since 1846, right? So we're talking about. Yeah, it's even the $5,000 means a lot. And if you say that you receive federal funding, if you're getting NEA, if you're getting, NEH money, that money is potentially not going to be there anymore. That means that your program, your organization, is going to possibly go away, and that's huge.
Well, speaking of going away, also this week, and this was kind of quiet and underreported, but the President's Committee on Arts and Humanities also went away. And this is a commission that you had everybody from somebody like Lady Gaga, who was the chair of the committee, to a Goldman Sachs executive. And over the years, Frank Sinatra, Yo-Yo Ma, and others have served on this. So they're the President's eyes and ears, essentially, on the cultural community in the United States, and this has just been dissolved.
Started by Ronald Reagan.
I was just going to say, if he's going by Reagan in politics, then
the whole idea was created by Ronald Reagan and has been sort of carried on since then. So let's remember that. And by the way, I mean, it's interesting because I think we talked last week about Donald Trump forming what sounded like some sort of similar committee about I'm going to have my liaisons in Hollywood kind of looking at Hollywood and reporting back to me and making kind of recommendations to me about how we should be working with Hollywood. Well, you already had one here, which you've now disbanded as you've sort of added this other one. And again, I look at this and he got into a little bit of a back and forth in his first.
Yes, the first.
In his first go around with this same group. It wasn't made up of the same people at the time, but they all resigned. And then he said, well, I was going to get rid of them anyway. And then Biden reinstated it.
Right. And I just think it's this constant back and forth. I mean, what I think that people don't understand, I mean, first of all, this office is their budget's $335,000.
$335,000.
That's nothing, right?
Yep.
But I don't think that people also understand what it did. So under Bill Clinton, it funded public arts education. It required high school students to have competency in foreign languages. It expanded tax incentives for cultural philanthropy. Obama had the turnaround arts to help boost arts education in low-performing schools. This is what these committees did. It wasn't just, we're going to help support whatever. These were like real policies that were really affecting change in young people's lives and other people's lives around arts and culture.
And by the way, sounds exactly like the kind of stuff that we hear coming out of his mouth when when President Trump often says things like, we've got to get the smartest people around here. I'm going to get the best advisors and the smartest people who know the most about this thing, and then they're going to come around me and we're going to make the best decisions.
Right.
Well, it sounds like with this committee, that's exactly what you had in this space.
But guess who was head of this committee? George Clooney.
That's right. Yeah.
And Lady Gaga.
And of course, he would assemble his own group, which presumably would be people like Sylvester Stallone and Mel Gibson, and the people he was
that's
tapping
fine.
to be his entree into Hollywood.
As long as it's there.
By the way,
his
that's
eyes and ears on Hollywood.
Yes,
by the
but
way.
that's fine. I mean, by all means, you're the duly elected president. Like, put whoever you want to put on this task
But don't
force.
take it away.
Yeah,
I
agree.
It clearly
I
has.
agree.
We'll continue to follow this because so far there has been subtraction and as far as we can tell, no addition to the arts under these early days of the Trump presidency. Well, now on to the dream of an opera much deferred. Edmund Day, a fourth-generation free black man, wrote an opera titled Morgiane in 1887, but his manuscript was lost to history for more than a century until it was discovered in the archives at Harvard University's Houghton Library. Now, for the first time, thanks to a collaboration between Opera Lafayette and Opera Creole, it comes to life with performances in Washington and New York. This is just such a beautiful story, and it always makes me think of all the things that are out there that we still don't know about as these excavations happen. But this is a man who had grown up spent a lot of time in New Orleans, so there's a lot of French influence. There's a lot of, for his days in the early 1800s, a lot of pop culture influence. He ultimately goes to France, creates this opera, never gets staged. He sadly goes into obscurity and dies buried in a cemetery where he goes unmarked until this discovery at the Houghton Library and people putting it all back together.
Incredible. I mean, this is that story where it's the same story about that person who bought that. What was it, a Van Gogh for $10? But I mean, there are all these hidden things. You're right. They're in people's attics. And people have no idea that they're there. This is amazing. He also spent time in Mexico. This was also because it was part of that whole movement where African Americans were not able to do the work that they wanted to do or loved to do, or a passion with music and arts, moved to Paris and was much more accepted there and created a whole life of music and ballet. He did, he composed so many amazing things. I think it's really funny that it was at Harvard. How many things are in the Harvard Library?
No,
do we need to start going through and looking?
A few things on this. First of all, there's a great New York Times piece that I encourage anybody to read about this, because the backstory of this whole thing itself, I want to see the Prestige TV two-season show about both this man's life and also how this kind of came to the fore. But there's a little detail in that story that really caught my eyes, and I think in some ways it does connect with what we were just talking about in terms of the way we do funding in this country with the NEA and the NEH, and we think about science grants, and this idea of just people who have expertise doing research and kind of being out there in the world, and sometimes things that come to fruition and sometimes don't. So one of the things that caught my eye in this is, so there was a collector out there, right, who was collecting all these rare manuscripts, and this got caught up in this collection, right? They then sold that, and there's an expert at Harvard who recognized it enough to say, there's amazing stuff in this collection. We're going to grab this, right? Then, over a course of years, they're sorting through all of these manuscripts, and there's a person there at Harvard who's in charge of going through it. And it would be easy to miss this. However, one of the things she notes is that earlier, not too long before she was going through this, she had attended a conference, and in that conference there was a great talk about black opera in the 19th century in New Orleans, right? So that's not necessarily her level of expertise, but she's at a conference where minds are together. This happens to be floating in her head, and as she's going through this stuff, she recognizes this specifically as very important. That's how it works.
Right. Serendipitous.
But that's how serendipity works.
I know.
It's not always just luck.
Exactly.
It's also putting yourself out there in the world and like working at your craft and learning more
And having
as you
people
go.
doing research and researching these things, because then we never would have found it.
And we should mention
Exactly.
we're talking about this because it's about to be staged in Washington, D.C. and New York. And last year, NBC Nightly News profiled Opera Creole during rehearsals for Mojian. Here's one of Edmond Deday's descendants, Harold Deday III, talking about the significance of bringing this piece to life.
It won't die. It means that maybe for the next 100 years, people will remember who he is. I think he would be able to stand upright with his chest out, smile, and say, I did this for y'all. No matter what your circumstances are, no matter what you're born into, life is full of possibilities.
Well, I was going to, it sounds like that piece did a little bit, but I want to play a little bit of music for this too, because this has been building. We'll talk a little bit about that process too, which is really fascinating, sort of the ethics of how you make choices when you don't have access to the composer. But a few years ago, UC Davis performed excerpts from the opera, and here's one of those. So one of the really fascinating things I thought about this was that they were going through these manuscripts, and in some cases there are instruments that are no longer used in modern orchestras.
Yeah.
There are times they couldn't necessarily read some of his notations. So they have to make choices, which is very interesting too. So it may not be exactly as he wrote it, but you have a team diving into it, trying to pull out all of the essence of his work and decoding what he wanted to present. It's just going back to Edgar's example of what the Prestige TV will look like. That'll be a
that's a whole episode right there.
And as you said, of the expertise, like we have these people who are doing this work and have this expertise is what we need in order to get to where we are today.
And also just a reminder, I mean, there are a lot of players along the way in this, including somebody who was talking about, I mean, hopefully this sort of is just the tip of a spear in a rediscovery of what sounds like is a very sort of lost and important part of American history, culture, music, and that is this early 1800s free black people
that's what I was gonna
in
say.
opera, in New Orleans, in the place, not accidentally, where jazz would develop over the next few decades.
This is a whole American cultural story.
Yes, it
this
is
a story of freed blacks. This is it was all happening when you look at New Orleans as being one of the biggest slave-holding states, and then you have him, and then he has to. I mean, this is a whole history lesson,
and
not
also,
just about music, but about the culture of America.
And moving past assumptions too, because all of a sudden, as I'm thinking about this, I'm remembering actually at this very table, I interviewed Annette Gordon-Reed, the scholar who talked about Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson and their relationship, and she moved that forward, and she's still encountering people who come up to her and say, well, how could Sally Hemings survive in France? How could she know and understand French? Like Gordon-Reed saying, she was in France, she was an intelligent woman. This is the same thing. People will make this assumption, well, how could somebody of that time possibly produce an opera? Well, clearly they produced a very robust opera, so it makes
and his father was also a
understanding.
musician. He was around this his whole life.
Right.
Yes.
Well, coming up, how the film Emilia Perez prompts a parody and provokes a culture clash between France and Mexico. That's next on our Arts and Culture Week in Review. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, members of the state's congressional delegation are highlighting how the Trump administration's rescinded funding freeze and other policies are affecting Massachusetts. And this week's Joy Beat takes us to where beauty meets impact, a salon empowering people of color to feel confident and training them for success. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Boston Symphony Orchestra, presenting Stravinsky's The Firebird, February 6th, 7th, and 8th at Symphony Hall, a wondrous experience conducted by Natalie Stutzman. More information at bso.org. And MIT Federal Credit Union, helping members get started on their savings journey with the MIT Federal Credit Union Starter Savings Account, federally insured by NCUA. Memberships open to the general public. More at mitfcu.org. And American Repertory Theater, presenting The Odyssey, Kate Hamill's newest world premiere adaptation that turns a contemporary lens on Homer's classic tale. February 9th through March 16th, amrep.org.
From GBH News, I'm Soraya Wintersmith. Join me for What is Owed, a podcast exploring how one of America's oldest cities is figuring out its reparations debt.
Available at gbhnews.org and wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-host Edgar B. Horwick III and Culture Show contributor Lisa Simmons. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, which includes the Mona Lisa. Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece will be furnished with both a room of her own and a dedicated entrance as part of sweeping renovations at the Louvre Museum in Paris. So this has been causing a lot of consternation. I had the fortune of being at the Louvre last year, and I have a hack until this happens in 2026 when she gets moved into the basement. You get your ticket, go there first thing, and then you can walk right up and you can see the Mona Lisa before other people find their way to it. But this is the problem, is that there are huge long lines of people, throngs of people, or people thronging, I should say, to see the Mona Lisa, all taking a selfie and then moving on. And the Louvre has understood that this is problematic. They have so many people going through the museum that there's a lot of wear and tear. So Emmanuel Macron decided that he could use this as political leverage, and he's announced hundreds of millions of dollars in renovations, or euros, I should say, for the Louvre, and that she will be moved into a space, it sounds like beneath where she is now, and you can just have that very singular experience. Because the other thing I noticed is that right outside her gallery, there are, I think, 3 other Leonardo paintings that people just race by. Go their way to see the Mona Lisa.
They do that in any museum.
And
Come on.
those other paintings are just as exquisite, but nobody wants to see those.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it is the Mona Lisa. I was there too last year, 2 years ago, and there were throngs and throngs of people, but we figured out a way to get around and be able to take a picture. I mean, okay, she's getting her own room. She's finally getting her own room.
She's getting her own room.
I mean, she gets her own phone. Does she get her own, But I mean, I do think it's interesting. But what I think is interesting is that now it's going to be an extra charge. So if people are going to be upset because they can't see her with the throngs of people, I don't know how he's going to manage. They're going to manage the.
Well, I mean, it's
the
interesting.
traffic
We were just sort of talking about this. He has noted that there will be no taxpayer money put to this renovation. So we were just talking about federal funding for the arts, and in this case, they're saying it's going to be private donations, and then
licensing royalties,
this raising
and
of the rate for the ticket revenue. Although that said, if you sort of look at it right now, it's €22 to get into the Louvre. That's about $24. That's right. I mean, the Met is $30. I think the MFA is $27. It's very comparable. So that's pretty comparable, and they're only talking about raising it a couple dollars. So I'm okay with that. I think maybe this is like a good. I don't know. I think it's potentially a good thing. I think this is potentially a good thing, and I think it is good to every once in a while, even with big, huge, historic institutions that have millions and millions of people coming through all of the time, to make some upgrades. And
I mean, I think it is. I'm just concerned about access. I'm just concerned that it's going to be something where you're going to get there and you're not going to get. It's going to be like a ticketed, timed thing, and you're not going to get those tickets, and you're only there once. In lifetime in Paris and seeing this. So, I mean, I guess, I understand that it's really busy and 9 million people come in or whatever it is.
It's a lot.
It's
the
a
day
lot
that I was there,
I know, the day I was there, yes, there are a lot of
people.
It's also a soft target. So I mean, putting quote-unquote baby in a corner, maybe it will be helpful. But
but it's also interesting to think that this is Emmanuel Macron's legacy. Look what he did with Notre Dame in 5 years. And now he's saying he won't be president for sure. Maybe he will. I don't know. I can't forecast French politics. Nobody really can, actually, including Emmanuel Macron. But I think that in 2020, if they can do this by 2026, they're already putting out an invitation for architectural renderings, because they would move the entrance away from the pyramid that's very iconic.
Which, by the way, also people were crazy. Like, how are you doing this pyramid? I think Francois Mitterrand was called a megalomaniac for trying to do the pyramid thing, and it has now become a huge iconic piece of the Louvre experience. But it was majorly controversial in '89.
Yes. Exactly.
Well, this is what happens when you touch the world's largest museum.
Yeah.
And then the other little ripple to this is that Milan has entered the picture here.
They still want it
and
back?
Milan has said, you know what, if you're going to take this little time for her and while she's in between
ours.
rooms, maybe you can send her to us, where we have the Last Supper, of course, and we'll happily put her on view. And really, you should put her on view here because, of course, he is Italian. He died and is buried in France. And I think it's largely been settled that this was not.
It was a gift.
It was purchased. Or a gift, but there was a long relationship between Leonardo da Vinci and the king, and so it went there without being stolen. But Italy is making a plea to have her come back for a little while.
I don't think a little while. I think they better.
Yeah,
I'm thinking they need to think about that one.
I don't know.
They're like, really, come on over.
Yeah, no, just for a visit. No,
we're just
going
gonna hang it on the wall. It looks pretty there. That's
pay no attention to the locks in this room where we're putting her.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, exactly.
What do we have against the Italians here at this table?
I don't know. I'm
against
just
the
concerned.
Italians. I just sort of feel like
if you've been wanting it back for all that time and then you get it back, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'd
I
be
know.
like,
I think it's
no.
suspicious too.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to linger in France for a little longer because it's the land of baguettes and berets. It's the land of mimes and mustachioed men. At least that's how Mexico is parodying the French in a short film responding to Emilia Perez, its French director, and how the shot in France film portrays Mexico. So, again, really good week for you to be with us, Lisa Simmons, movie maven.
Yes.
Because there is this growing backlash against Emilia Perez.
Knew. I didn't know this when it first came out because it came out like with such fanfare, and it was like, you know, Hollywood loves these like outside of the box, just like everywhere, everything all at once. It was sort of like, you know, oh yeah, this is really cool. This is something we haven't seen before. So, and it was, you know, a trans person, and it was like, yes, this is going to be great, and the music, and Selena Gomez, and Zoe Saldana. I mean, it was just, and then all of a sudden, you're right. It's problematic.
So we should explain that this is a film about a drug cartel leader who decides to transition and goes through the transition and then starts an NGO in Mexico to try to stem the abductions and the violence. And this is also a musical.
Right.
And then we learn that it's by a French director who didn't spend a lot of time getting to know Mexico. It was shot almost entirely in France. It was shot entirely in France.
No Mexican lead actors.
Only one Mexican.
So this has led to this spoof that we're going to play a little clip of for you. It's in Spanish, but you might get the idea. Here's a clip of the song Bienvenidos a la France from the spoof musical Johann Sacre Bleu, the musical.
Oh mon ami, Mexi Sacre Bleu, como tu te appelles, Mexi déjà vu, bon voyage, pizza croissant, croissant.
So we'll fill in the picture for you here. There are lots of dancing mimes around here, lots of
Everybody's
baguettes.
got the mustaches.
There's a character
the
named
fake
Ratatouille.
mustaches.
But a lot of people are looking at this spoof now and saying this is better than Emilia Perez because they find that offensive. GLAAD has actually come out and it called
decried its representation, calling it a step backwards.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the criticism has come on related but two separate fronts, right? There is the questions about whether or not this is a retrograde way to present a trans character. That's one.
Yes.
And then the other is from people in Mexico saying like this is like this is like a terrible representation of Mexico. That there are not anywhere near enough Mexican actors in this piece. You didn't know Mexico, so that's kind of related. That said, there's also people who are coming to defend the situation as well. That includes filmmakers like Guillermo del Toro, who's apparently loved the film, and also I want to get this name right. Adriana Paz, who is the one Mexican actress who is in this movie, who said, like, I loved being in the movie. I think it's great. I don't really see the problem here. I think this dialogue is good. I think what I really like about this is that the fact that this person makes this film in Mexico as like a fun response and a poke back. This to me is the perfect example of like, rather than censoring the thing, make more art.
Right. Make more art.
Make more art.
And she's a first-time film director, and she came up with this because she's like, exactly. I think it's sort of like, we're going to push back, and this is how we're going to push back, and we're going to create this really funny, real parody, and not be serious about it. And that's one of the issues with Emilia Perez, is that if you're not going to go deep into and you're trying to make a film about the drug cartels and trying to better yourself, then either make it funny and with it a musical, or actually do the homework and do it a little bit deeper. So
but
I think
the
that's part of it.
filmmaker has said, like, essentially this is an opera, so it's not meant to be, like, the film is not meant to be realistic per se.
Right, exactly. But then what someone said, then if that's the case, if you're like now entering quote unquote the Ivy Leagues, like the Academy Awards and everything like that, and trying to be something that you're actually not, that's where they felt like it became problematic.
Well, I think this is the trouble too, is that because it started to get all of this attention, because it was a Golden Globes winner and it got 13 Oscar nominations. Now people are really scrutinizing it in a way that, as we started out by saying, who knew? I thought it was really funny. J.P. Grammer in the LA Times wrote, it's a bit like if a Chilean director made a musical about the January 6th insurrection and cast mostly Thai people.
Yeah.
Although it's worth watching, maybe not the best representation. But I think it's a good dialogue, but now I'm fascinated to know how this is going to affect its Oscar chances, because I watched it and I thought it was wild and I thought it was really gripping, but I didn't necessarily see this as an Oscar contender, and I was as surprised as a lot of people when it started to get all of these Oscar nominations.
Right, and they talked just about how it's just so much layered too in the exoticization of the Latin American community, right? And that oftentimes you're doing these things around diversity and equity, but it's not hitting the mark.
And I also feel like an important factor here is the fact that, like, so I mean, I think a lot of people make works of art where they don't really know so much about a subject matter and they're using it to make some sort of other point. And it's one thing I think about, like, if Shakespeare is kind of making the point that Shakespeare was making by setting something in a kingdom where kings and queens, who are people who have power, are sort of being represented in a way that is in his imagination. That's fine. Those are people with power. It's okay to do that. To me, that's very different. I think one of the issues you have here is, I think people in Mexico, I think filmmakers in Mexico feel like they don't have as much of a voice as they should. I think people in the trans community feel like they do not have the voice that they should. And so when you're taking people who don't have the voice as strongly to tell their own story and using them, even if it's well-meaning, in a way that's making some kind of other point, that's to me where it starts to become a little bit differently problematic.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, coming up, LA's biggest stars come together for the Fire Aid benefit concert. That's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
In Korea, shamanism is a religious tradition that dates back thousands of years. Its practice remains widespread, but it's publicly frowned upon.
Basically, the Korean people, they don't want to reveal that they use shamanic services.
We bring you that story and the day's top global news next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Mobile, featuring data options that include streaming, browsing, and texting. More information is available at xfinity.com/mobile. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer, the Unclaimed Property Division, is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And Celebrity Series of Boston, presenting Counterpoint, a collaboration between pianist Conrad Tao and tap dancer Caleb Teicher, live at Boston Arts Academy on February 7th and 8th. Tickets at celebrityseries.org.
Stories from the Stage is looking for new storytellers. Is your journey about the destination or getting there? Share with us a tale of travel and revelations from the road. Apply today at worldchannel.org/storytellers.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-host Edgar B. Horwick III and Culture Show contributor Lisa Simmons. We're listening to the surprise Nirvana reunion at last night's Fire Aid benefit concert. Here's Violet Grohl, daughter of Dave, taking the Kurt Cobain part.
Everyone's scared.
was pretty staggering to watch this last night and into this morning
Yeah.
because that's how long it lasted. It was a two-arena
a long
event
night.
featuring a staggering array of musicians, Rod Stewart to Joni Mitchell, Alanis Morissette to Lady Gaga, Billie Eilish to Olivia Rodrigo, all raising funds for wildlife recovery and prevention. I think this is a good antidote, a good answer to a lot of what we've been talking about on this show, division and a lack of support and things not coming together. And in very short order, this concert was assembled, these concerts. It was really one unit, but two concerts, as we said, in two separate venues, an amazing array of artists who just volunteered their time, did this, and it was captivating. And then you had gifts like this, Nirvana coming back together, and a roster of artists stepping in to sing the Kurt Cobain part.
Yeah, Kim Gordon, St. Vincent, Joan Jett, which anybody who sort of knows and like Nirvana, I think they would have. I get the sense that Kurt Cobain would have really loved the fact that it was females who stepped in and sang the part in this Nirvana reunion. And this was amazing. I mean, I think the other thing here is. Not only the artists and everybody coming in, but the two biggest kind of ticket sales operations in the universe work together. They're normally rivals. They work together to get tickets out for this. And all of these different networks who are in competition with each other were also streaming it together, right? It was on YouTube, and it was on Amazon, it was on Apple TV, and it was, So I think that, again, is another kind of amazing little piece of this story. I mean, apparently they had this venue booked like 3 days after the fire started.
Exactly.
Like, they were like,
we need to do something. I think that's amazing.
I'm going to age myself a little bit here, but when Billy Crystal came out in the beginning and he sort of came out and hosted, I was immediately taken back to Comic Relief, which I hadn't thought about in so long.
And I went back to the Oscars.
I was just going to say, I went back to the Oscars when he was. Whoa. I went back to the Oscars when he came out on the horse.
That's right, for City Slickers.
City
Slickers and Jack Palance.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, before we talk more about Billy Crystal, here he is appearing as the first host of the night wearing, this was very poignant, the same clothes he was wearing when he fled his family home, which completely burned to the ground in the Palisades fire, and he recalled another time of national pain.
I wanted to be here tonight because a little over 23 years ago, and just a month after 9/11, I was asked to welcome the audience at the Concert for New York at Madison Square Garden. With Ground Zero still smoldering, I walked out to a grieving audience holding up signs with pictures of their loved ones on them, asking, "Have you seen them?" It was all I could do to get my first words out. And tonight, here I am, talking to all of you in pain. But now I'm also one of the hurting thousands asking, "Have you seen my school? Have you seen my church? Have you seen my house? Have you seen my town? Have you seen the 29 people who lost their lives? Have you seen them?" On that night in 2001, we were mourning the loss of hundreds of firefighters and police officers and first responders. Tonight, we are here together to thank them and all those who run towards danger while we run to shelter in safety.
There's almost no better person to start that last night.
Yeah, that's really pretty amazing. I mean, it just reminds me of We Are the World when they all got together to create that song for Aid for Africa. I mean, this is it. This is what the arts do, right? You step up, you are a community, you are a village, and everyone is hurting, but everyone knows that they need to be together. What I really liked about this too was the testimonials, because I think what's really important is the whole story around Altadena, and Altadena having one of the most diverse populations in California, because after during Jim Crow, people moved north, and that was the only place that African American and Latino American folks could actually buy homes. So when you're talking about losing your house in a fire, and there are celebrities and people who have lost everything but maybe have the opportunity to rebuild, we're talking about families and communities that have been there for generations that don't have that opportunity. So I was really happy to see both the Palisades folks and the Eaton Fire Altadena folks coming together, and people understanding the impact of this community.
And so many people have been obviously stepping forward with money. By the way, anybody who's listening to our conversation right now, you can obviously still go online and contribute. They're still collecting donations, as they were all throughout the Fire Aid concert last night. But U2 stepped forward with $1 million. I think the Clippers, the owners of that stadium, just stepped forward. They gave that stadium. The first person who stepped up and he said he would perform was Rod Stewart. Here's a little bit of Rod Stewart's performance at last night's concert.
May you grow to be proud, dignified and true. Do unto others as you have done to you. Be courageous and be brave, and in my heart always remain forever young.
Speaking of which, what is Rod Stewart, Keith Richards, Tom Jones? What did that entire generation
I
do?
have no
Because they
idea.
are phenomenal.
I know.
And
They just
watching
kept
him
going.
dance
They never
across that
said no.
stage
I
last
know.
night.
They're all
I know.
English, so that might have something to do with it.
Oh,
I don't know.
possibly.
You know what else really struck me is how much. I mean, I think we've talked a lot, and I certainly think a lot about the fact that when we think about L.A. and the arts in L.A., we think so much about film and television. But music is such a huge piece of this, and so many, so you had Rod Stewart doing, Forever Young. There were a number of songs that were kind of your classic, uplifting songs. But many of these artists either were LA artists or were doing songs that are about LA or reference LA or California. And I guess it's something I know, but watching it performance after performance, being reminded how big a piece of the music culture LA is.
Right, of course. Well, I mean,
of course, but it's. I think it's easy to forget to a certain extent.
Yes, and I think that Joni Mitchell also who performed, which was pretty amazing, and I think it's amazing too. It's on the heels of the Grammys, right? So
which we'll talk about in just a second.
Which I think is amazing too, to bring them all together. Then they're all going to be together again and still doing that, raising those funds.
And they said they were able to do this without capitalizing on the talent that was already in town for the Grammys. But before we switch over to the Grammys, we'll end this segment the way the concert ended, and that's with Lady Gaga for her final song of the night, and to close out the concert, which was around 3:45 Eastern Standard Time. Wow. She performed a new original number. Here's what she had to say, again, early this morning.
When I was thinking about what to sing tonight, I thought I wanted to do something hopeful for you. And I was thinking about my songs, and there wasn't anything that seemed quite right. So me and my friend Michael, my fiance, my love, we wrote this song for you. It's just for tonight, it's just for you. Wish that God could find a different way to remind me what it's like to pray. Wish that I could turn the storm around. If I can, I'll find a different way. All I need is time. All I need is time. All I need is time to heal my broken wings, and then also.
Nice and bouncy and fun. Well, let's switch over to the Grammys now, as you were just forecasting. So this is going to happen this weekend. Yes. Big night, because yet again, we'll be talking about Beyonce, and is she going to finally
oh my gosh,
get
over
the hump?
Can
she do it? What do you prediction?
Prediction is yes.
Oh.
Yes.
All
I'm
right.
predicting that, yes, she is going to win this year. Because if not, I'm concerned about what might happen. No.
Civil cultural unrest, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, cultural unrest. I mean, come on. She has got the most nominations. She, this was a love to her Texas roots. I just feel like, I'm rooting for it.
Yeah, I mean, I am too, and not to her roots, but I think also kind of planting a bit of a flag in the ground in terms of on the heels of that album coming out. I think we saw a lot of people and a lot of stories and a lot of spotlights being shown on black artists in the country field, and a conversation about where did country music come from, and who owns country music,
who's
right?
allowed to sing it,
and I think that is 100% intentional on Beyonce's part by putting an album out like this.
No, of course.
She is setting an agenda, and kudos to her for that.
Absolutely. And then when she did the halftime show over Christmas at the Texas game, It was sort of like, oh, was that just because she was there to do that? No, she was basically saying, like, don't forget.
Yep.
Like,
Give it to me.
This is who I am. Don't forget.
Know.
Like,
I'm not
this
as
is,
confident. I'm a little anxious about this one. I don't necessarily. It's a tough category, but I will say the other major thing I'm looking forward to is the Quincy Jones tribute.
Yes.
Yes.
Can you imagine who's going to turn out? And they're so good, just like Fire Aid. They're so good at turning out major surprises.
Yes.
And so I think that's going to be one to just watch over and over again, which is super exciting.
Yeah, and as our producer Brian Bell was talking about in one of our meetings this week, I mean, the Grammys, as far as award show greats, as far as award shows go, are kind of great because they stand on their own, because it really is as much about the performances and the performers who are there as it is the awards. And there are a ton of performers performing.
Yes.
Lots of different genres. So
and it's the first. This is the first award show since the fires.
Yeah.
Right. So that's going to be very.
And they were very deliberate, and they said they will be very mindful of what's happening in Los Angeles, and it's going to be more about, as I think somebody described, the real heroes who are the firefighters and all of the rescuers who were part of these and remain part of these efforts, and not about the celebrities. So we'll see that as well. Well, it's Friday, which can only mean one thing.
It's time for Follow-Up Friday. Follow-Up Friday. Follow-Up Friday.
That's right. It's Follow-Up Friday, which includes Boston City Hall. It's now set in concrete. The Brutalist masterpiece is officially an historic landmark. I have to say, I love City Hall, and I love this debate about whether it's beautiful or not, but I'm so tired of talking about it.
I know, right?
So,
But why wouldn't it be a historic landmark? Just because it doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be, but it is historical, and it is a landmark.
But just within the last few years, Mayor Menino wanted to tear it down
Oh, I
and
know.
move to the seaport, and I think Mayor Walsh wondered about it.
Because
didn't
it
move
is
it as far as
brutal. It
Menino.
is, even when you go inside, it's brutal. But it has, it's architecture. It has a purpose, and I think it should be a landmark.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. I'm with you. It's like 100% no question in my mind that, like, whether you love it or hate it or are indifferent, I mean, it is a cultural centerpiece.
Yes.
I mean, it is just visually, it is arresting, whether for good or bad reasons. I mean,
Right.
But also just now it's been 50 years, and I think the debate has never really waned about this, right? Over the course of that 50 years, it's not like at any point like there has been a consensus that we love it or we hate it. To me, I mean, that's an achievement in architecture. If you can put something out that for 50 years people are still
talking about,
with,
people are still having conversations
that
about.
is
They
something.
say that makes good art and iconic architecture when you're continuing to talk about it.
Well, now they can't change the exterior, but they can do the upgrades that they've been wanting to do.
Good. See?
Well, people are also taking the interactive and winteractive in the public art installation too literally. One of the artworks depicting a satellite that has fallen from the sky onto a car was vandalized, with the perpetrator removing the satellite. So we talked about this. We talked about everything you can see in Downtown Crossing and its surrounds, including on City Hall Plaza right now, a bunch of public art, and including large pink inflatable men. But this was one piece with a car that had I think I talked about it as part of my lightning round because it got a parking ticket, and then we found out that that was part of the installation.
Which is clever.
This week, somebody swiped the satellite, started walking away with it. We were a little confused about the reporting on this, so we clarified.
Oh, good.
And somebody basically took the satellite off and then kept going, and they suggested that it wasn't somebody who really wanted to walk away from it. It was just disturbed in the moment by the piece, and they have reassembled it, put it back together.
Yeah, I mean that's really sort of like getting up and close with public art. So
I mean, is anybody surprised somebody took they sort of knocked the satellite off?
And it probably was like, I bet you can't do that. Maybe it was a
drunk
dare.
teenager.
It was a dare.
I shouldn't say drunk
no,
teenager.
But I mean,
teenagers
but I mean,
do
it's
not
just like
drink, a drunk
but
young person.
But what the artist did say is that this has brought so much more attention to this piece, so that now people are now going down to take a look at it, to look at the other art. So that's great. You want people talking about it. This
the
is
piece on its face, by the way,
it.
is super
It's
cool.
Super cool.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, that is like right in my alley, so to speak, right up my alley, so to speak. But I love that, like just like a satellite smashed on a car in the middle of a city, turn a corner, and you encounter that. That is awesome.
Right. And that you would get a ticket because you couldn't move the car. That's even funnier.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Lisa, you're right. Artists love this. I remember once when the trustees of reservations had commissioned the artist, I believe his name is Doug Aiken, to do a silver metallic blue hot air balloon balloon that would float across Massachusetts, and we were shooting, Howard Powell and I from GBH, we were shooting a story in the hot air balloon when it had to basically crash land. I'm still standing.
What?
We're all still
Oh my
standing.
gosh. Wow.
It crash landed in rush hour traffic in the morning, and I turned around. The artist was so excited because he knew that this was going to get a lot of attention.
Totally
on his
get you a
artwork.
lot of attention.
I mean, we do say art is in conversation with the public, and if that conversation is, I dare you to do it, somebody's going to do it, right? And a little bit of that
if you're going to put it
art,
out
a little
there,
bit of it
it's
there.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the last installment of our follow-up Friday is finally the Gwyneth Paltrow ski trial saga spoof has made its way across the pond with performances off-Broadway and in L.A., where you'll be able to see it this weekend if you want to fly out there and skip the Grammys. And
There you go.
See
I
the
mean, I
Gwyneth
love
Paltrow
that.
think
That's
this
a
is-
flex.
I think
Like,
this
you're
is-
like, I could go to the Grammys, but instead I'm going to go to the
I think
Gwyneth
this is
Paltrow
hysterical.
musical.
I don't think people know about it, that there's actually a play about that whole craziness of that trial about the ski when she or he or. But what I like about this play is that the audience gets to decide who act. I mean, she won this trial and everyone was 100% for her, but the play allows you to make that decision about whether he should get. He should win the trial or she should. So.
It's also audience participation.
It is.
So there's only like a couple of actors who are actually in this, and then they ask for people from the audience to be a
Right.
part of it, and there are cue cards and there's prompters
It's like
for
those
them to read.
old murder mystery shows
Yeah,
where
there's
you
a
would go
couple
mystery
of,
dinner,
yeah,
like
there's
those
a couple of
murdered
music,
mystery
there's
dinners.
a couple of music numbers in it. Apparently, her daughter Apple is played by an apple.
Yes,
So they
yeah.
actually just like have an
And
apple on the stage.
and the
which is
lawyer's played by a
fantastic.
puppet.
I mean, this is really great.
It's off Broadway. I think it's great.
The only problem with all of this is that they have not brought it to Boston. And
I know.
From what I read, this was kind of the indication that came out of the Edinburgh Fringe Festival,
Yep.
which is
Yes.
a great incubator for really great theater and art. Six, the musical, started there. And then it finally came our way, but it just hopped right over us and going to off-Broadway and then to L.A. I think we
perhaps it'll
definitely
come
need to
back.
have this come here.
We know
We'll
who can
make
do
them-
that.
I think we
Make
need,
a call.
we need to stay on. We need to keep talking about this because I think the combined effort of us here, we can probably make the case for this to come to
In
Boston.
the
And
meantime,
especially
we
it's-
just have this one little clip from the
Oh.
musical, just to give us a taste
Yes.
and to show them how ravenous audiences are here in Boston to have them. But I Wish You Well, the Gwyneth Paltrow ski trial musical, tells the mostly true story of the campest celebrity trial in history, Gwyneth versus Terry. This is from its London West End run. I don't think I knew that Elphaba was in this musical. All right, well, that's hopefully coming our way. Well, that signals our lightning round. These are the stories that caught our attention this week. Edgar, what was yours?
Well, I think, I don't know if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, I was on about marketing around, a really fun marketing thing around a television show where I'm back at that again, caught my eye this week. Stranger Things. Have you heard of this television show, Stranger Things?
Yes, I
Bit
think so.
popular.
Yes,
So
yeah.
their final season is coming out, which is apparently going to be insane. It's like 8 episodes, right? But they're all like feature film length. So this is
Oh
going
my
to be like
gosh.
unbelievable. Part of why it's taken so long. But the marketing effort around this is starting to ramp up, and it's been clever so far. And the latest thing this week, which I think is really neat, is there's this like image that looks like a missing persons poster, and on that image is 11, or Jane Hopper as she's known in the show, and it's basically like this poster that says a reward of $3,000 will be paid for all leads which result in the locating of Jane Hopper, last seen walking on a sidewalk near Hawkins High School, etc., etc. Now the really clever bit of this is you are urged to contact the Hawkins Police Department if you have any information, and there's a number. And if you call that number, you will actually hear a response. So I encourage folks
did you
to
call
Did you do it?
I
Did you call
did
it?
call it, yes. And you find out a little bit about what is going to be happening in the scene. Just a little bit. The Hawkins Police Department answers. They let you know that because of the earthquake that has hit, the entire town is on lockdown.
Oh.
And they are seeking Jane Hopper and other people, but specifically Jane Hopper.
See,
So
and this is
very
what
exciting.
this is what shows and films need to do in order to create the engagement.
The buzz.
Right? The
Yeah.
public
I mean,
engagement. That's really important.
So, Lisa, what was
my
yours?
lightning round is Winnie the Pooh. I am a huge Winnie the Pooh fan. Have been my whole entire life.
That's sweet.
So, it's very sweet. Winnie the Pooh is sweet, and we need Winnie the Pooh right now more than anything.
Do you like the original drawings or the
It's
the
funny
more
you should say
Disney
that.
looking?
I like
Winnie
them
the Pooh?
both.
Oh,
I like them both.
okay.
So man finds trove of Winnie the Pooh drawings and manuscripts in his father's attic. This goes back to you never know what
You
you're
never
going
know
to
what's in the
find when you're
attic.
cleaning out people's attics. This happened to me when I was cleaning out my great aunt's attic and found all this information about the Negro Theater. But anyway, so always look in your attics. Everyone, talk to your elders and everything. But anyway, so they found like a collection of like Now We Are Six, House on Pooh Corner, and all of these things that they decided that they would go out to auction. So now all of these pieces have different homes in England and in the United States that people can have a part of it.
What do you
Winnie
love
the Pooh.
so much about Winnie the Pooh?
Because I just like the innocence, and I like that he's best friends with Piglet.
Oh, Piglet is cute.
Piglet's very
Leaving
cute.
Eeyore's side.
I just think
I'm a
he has
Tigger
really
guy.
Forget Buddha. Although I do love Buddha as well.
Well, my headline
Yes.
it's kind of adjacent to yours,
Yes.
actually. And in Tennessee, there is a woman who is with the University of the South. She's an archivist, and she has 2 lovely watercolors on her wall that she has enjoyed for a really long time. It's nice to have an art historian friend who can come over to your house and look at them and think, those look like Winslow Homer watercolors. Well, sure enough, she went to Antiques Roadshow. She went to our colleagues here at GBH
Nice.
who produced the nationally renowned Antiques Roadshow. And sure enough, they were Winslow Homer watercolors that had actually been purchased in her family at auction right around the same time he painted them. And they have just been passed down generation to generation to generation.
And nobody knew.
And nobody clocked that it was
Nobody clocked that it was Winslow Homer. She's not going to pass it down generation to generation because she just brought them up to Christie's, and one sold for $113,000, another sold for almost $77,000.
I'm sorry, I might be a little upset if I was the next one and was supposed to get that and put it on my wall.
They didn't explain the family dynamics, but it was pretty exciting. And what was really great is that because watercolors can be especially susceptible to light, one was a little faded, that's why I went for less, but one was kept in a dark bedroom for much of its life. So so it's still in pristine condition, and neither of these had been put into the Winslow Homer catalog, so they are newly published.
Wow.
And so really there for the world
But
to
I mean,
see.
but this is what's really important about, like, people laugh about like going to yard sales or going to, thrift shops, or it's real. I mean, you can find some incredible gems.
Which is surprising because we thought the Antiques Worth Apologies then ruined it for everybody
I know.
by people rummaging through their basements and attics.
Oh, no.
But nope, there are still finds happening.
Oh my
still
gosh.
finds.
Yes.
Well, that is all for this edition of The Culture Show. Tune in on Monday for musician and sound artist Courtney Swain. She'll join us for an in-studio performance ahead of her Celebrity Series concert, plus the puppetry behind the life and times of Michael Kay. Thanks today to the BPL technical and logistics crew. And thank you to everyone who came down here to the library to visit with us today. We really enjoy seeing you. Lisa, in 7 seconds, tell us where people can see you this weekend.
Oh, I'm going to be up in Beverly at the Cabot with a film festival called Amplify Voices.
Nice.
Well, go visit you. I'm Jared Bowen. Have an art and Lisa-filled weekend.
Where's Mary? Where is she? Where is she? She's just about to close up the library.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.